She has made me feel like I'm important and I can go at my own pace, and that's all you need sometimes when you're feeling like you got nobody.
It was helpful to have somebody there kind of holding my hand and guiding me and letting me know this is kind of the normal. It felt like I was becoming a new mom, so it was very interesting and helpful, very, very helpful.
You know, there was that self-conscious part of me, like, will I be accepted even though I'm not perfect?
What I like the most is that she really listens.
The support that she gives me is special because she does it with love, and it's just natural, you know. That's all I could say. It just feels like somebody that I've known since I was little.
You know, I said to Jeanette, Jeanette, you're supposed to be with me for 5 years. Jeanette said, yeah, I know, I'm going to be with you guys for 5 years. That's when I said, well, I guess I can trust her. She's going to be with us for 5 years.
Yo creo que quizás pasó como a la segunda visita o algo así, como que ya nos presentamos formalmente. Y luego ya creo que en la segunda visita estaba como todo más tranquilo, como muy, como que el ambiente era muy familiar, entonces yo me sentí muy cómoda.
Felt like she cared for Sparrow too, and Sparrow really enjoyed it. Yeah, she knew when Gabby came we were going to be making something or learning something, and she'd instantly start digging through Gabby's bags to find out what activity we were going to do.
Not only did we get the assistance with this program, but we also made a really good friend. I'm happy to call Gabby our friend.
I think the relationship that we've built has been just, she's a part of the family.
Are you prepared? We're the Office of Emergency Services, and we're committed to providing the most up-to-date and accurate information so that you and your family can stay safe during an emergency. Visit MendoReady.org. It's our one-stop shop for emergency information. You can sign up for emergency alerts, find your pre-established evacuation zone on our current emergencies map, and find hazard and preparedness information.
Imagine you're faced with a disaster such as a wildfire, and you're ordered to evacuate. I'll bet you wish you had more time in that moment. Now's your chance to buy yourself that time. Sign up for Nixle and Mendo Alerts on our website, MendoReady.org. Do it today.
If you want your family to be as resilient as possible, it's important to take some time today and visit MendoReady.org, where you can look up your pre-established evacuation zones on our current emergencies map. You can also find important tools to help maintain your situational awareness, such as the Alert California wildfire cameras and the Caltrans road conditions cameras. We hope you'll take some time today to prepare so that your family can be Mendo ready. Thank you.
When I first realized that I was going to be a parent, I was super scared. After 2 or 3 weeks of meeting in the home visiting program, I was totally comfortable with the fact that I was going to have a baby. Yes, I was still scared, but at the same time, I felt like I had some sense of strength behind me.
If I didn't have those resources that Jeanette provided me, I think it would be harder now.
I got into the program and I realized, like, oh, this is nice. And now look at me, I work at a family resource center with parents and families, all this stuff.
I'm so grateful that I got the opportunity to meet my home visitor, because without her, I think that I would be 10 steps behind from where I'm at right now.
Pero pues aquí pues ya los enseñan un poquito más cosas que uno no sabía. Como cuidarla, cómo desarrollarla, cómo educarla, y pues es algo bien porque pues cosas que yo no sabía pues ya usted nos las dijo y todo como consejos. Y pues muchas cosas que se aprendieron.
I don't know what's normal for a 22-month-old baby or an 18-month-old baby, you know. When we get together, we usually discuss and get some progress made with the baby. It makes me feel comfortable, and I associate my parenting with her, my home visitor, telling me, yeah, this is going great.
So it's nice to know where they're at, what stage they're at for every parent, and also to give, again, your children that head start in education.
If I had any questions with her, just call her up on the phone. You know, it was very relatable, very personal. And, you know, with her getting to know my kids, you know, she got to kind of help guide me along the way. I mean, there were so many cool things that I've learned.
I went from a very like rough type of life. I was homeless, and she was able to help me get into school, and I actually have enough credits to graduate with a business degree right now.
I think I really want to mention just that I'm grateful that I took advantage, because it's something that has put me in touch with my child, or closer to my child and her development.
I want other people and parents to know that the home visiting is not something that you should be afraid of. It's actually something that is needed.
You know, because she's not just here for her, she's here to help with all of it. She helped me create a safe space where I feel comfortable enough to ask for help.
Don't be afraid to take that step. Like, don't be afraid to get help. It's always okay to have extra support.
I would say, give it a try. You got nothing to lose. It's free. There's some perks, you know. They got some great resources.
Personally, I think everybody could benefit from the home visiting programs.
I realized that my life was going to change dramatically in ways that I did not know or understand or even comprehend. I was going to have to really go to the well and become accountable and adjust to a lot of things differently.
Que queríamos era que naciera, ya, sí, ya quiero tener, entonces ahorita lo que tenemos es aprovecharla, quererla y cuidarla lo más que se pueda.
Creo que a todos nos preocupa la primera vez que nos dicen que vamos a ser padres.
When we started the program, my daughter was about 3 months, and my daughter's 22 months now. Something I love about my child, that she's healthy, she's happy, she knows that she's cared for and loved. Those are some of the things that I wanted to make sure that she had, and she has them.
I'm happy today with my daughter. She's the greatest thing in my life, and I'm glad to wake up and see her, and everything I do it for her.
Sí, bueno, yo también vengo de una familia separada. Creo que por eso también me motiva a estar más presente con él, de quizás también estar de la forma quizás que yo no la tuve.
After 10 o'clock on April 25th, and I'm calling the Ukiah Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency meeting to order. The first order of business is roll call. Indigo.
Okay, Director Crane.
Present.
Director Gasca.
Present.
Director Navarez. Director McNerlin.
Present.
Director White.
Present.
And Chair McCordy.
Present. Okay, so first order of business, approval of agenda. So is there any additions? deletions at this time? Seeing none, we will move on to public comment. So this is reserved for the public to address the board about matters not on the agenda and within the jurisdiction of the board. Persons wishing to speak on specific agenda items should do so at the time of the specific items. Is there anybody who wishes to address the public at this time? Go ahead. State your name for the record, please.
Thank you, Chair McGordy and directors. My name is Samantha Adams. I'm from West Yost. I'm our groundwater and surface water business sector leader and the principal in charge of the GSA's contract with West Yost to provide administrative services. And I wanted to take a moment to introduce myself and mostly to express my gratitude to the board as well as your technical advisory committee for your collaboration over the last month as we worked to identify a new general manager for the organization. West Yost is really excited that we identified Harry Starkey to step in and resume the responsibility for the role of general manager. And we are supremely confident in his ability to lead the GSA. He brings a wealth of experience leading public agencies, and he's done a fantastic job over the last month working hand in hand with Eric Carteret and the rest of the West Yost team to get up to speed and onboarded and ready to support the organization. We're really excited to see his success moving forward. I also just want to reiterate and reinforce that West Yost has taken on the full burden of any costs associated with the transition of the general manager to ensure this successful transition. And if at any time now or going forward you ever have questions or concerns or need any support at all from our team, you're welcome to reach out to me. So thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else? I don't see anyone online. So with that, we're going to move on to the next item, which is item 4, discussion and possible action, a general manager transition. We're going to receive an update on the transition of the general manager, or unless that was just it. Harry?
I think that covers it, and with the exception of Al and Teresa, I think I've had pretty lengthy discussions with each of you. Delighted to step into this role, and my goal and objective in this role is really just to reflect the will of the board and the community and help you guys stay in compliance with SGMA, as awkward as that can be and challenging at times, but just happy to be on board and looking forward to serve.
Well, thank you. That's simple enough. So just for the record, for the rest of the public, would you like to just briefly describe some of your past employment?
Certainly. So learned water, the water business at the Kern County Water Agency as a project engineer. I've managed 2 other water districts down in Kern County, one agricultural and the other as a municipal water district. So roughly 30 years of experience, a lot of work on water banking projects, both in the development, operation, and management. Done a lot with water marketing down in the southern San Joaquin Valley, and wrote the GSP for my former water district. So was on the ground floor of SGMA when it was being developed, and then the implementation in Kern County. So very familiar with that. So I guess I'm a generalist in the water field. I understand groundwater and surface water and the management of both. So resident of Sacramento as of 5 years ago, but born and raised in Bakersfield, California.
You told me you have a vacation home in Bakersfield.
I do. I maintain a vacation home in Bakersfield, and if you're ever traveling through the area and need a place to stay, just let me know.
Okay. So I don't travel to Bakersfield that much anymore. I used to when we lived in Paso Robles, but not any longer. I do have a question for you, though, in terms of experience. So as we go forward, trying to manage water that will be coming from the Eel River Transfer Project, you have experience with how to go about groundwater storage and banking and how that might work?
Oh, certainly. I mean, that's been a big part of my career. So probably the largest water bank in the world, the Kern Water Bank. I was the project engineer for the construction of that when that land was deeded to local agencies from Department of Water Resources. It was a project that was floundering under state leadership, and it was an interesting negotiation to move that into local ownership. And so not only was I involved in the construction of it, but then the ultimate operation and the management of transfers and withdrawals from it, as well as the Berenda Mesa project, the Pioneer project, the North and South projects for the West Kern Water District. So, you know, one of the interesting, I think, features of the Southern San Joaquin Valley is enormous aquifer space and very favorable soil conditions for groundwater recharge. And so, you know, it's those kind of elements that provide opportunities to do, you know, store wet year water for dry year opportunities. So.
Because I suspect that'll be part of our mix as we stop doing summer transfers and move to winter transfers from the Eel River Basin. And I believe that eventually we might get Coyote Dam raised, but I think there's also a good possibility we could store water in the ground here because Ukiah Valley Basin does have some potential for that.
Yeah, so it's an opportunity. And I'd love to, you know, possibly bring my experience to bear on maybe developing those kinds of options and enhancements to local water management.
Okay, well, thank you for that. So we're excited to have you here and looking forward to working with you. It's clear you have experience and just what we need at this time as we kind of slowly move forward and taking control of our groundwater here and managing in a way that's, as I talk about, this is water management for the next 100 years, coming off of a period of very inexpensive water that basically was abandoned water from PG&E's hydroelectric project, and now we really have to kind of take responsibility and ownership for what we have, and it's going to be a challenge. So glad you're with us.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next issue that we have is that we'd like to have an ad hoc for working with Harry to get him sort of oriented and functional with our organization. My suggestion for an ad hoc be that it would be the chair of the board and then also the chair of the TAC. And that would, you know, unless somebody would rather step in. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. You need.
I wouldn't mind volunteering to help with that.
Okay. Anybody else? Beth?
I'd like to add the vice chair of the TAC as well, Sean White.
Okay. Well, that's good then.
If he's willing to serve.
Got chair and vice chair, so then we have 4 people to basically help as we start off with orientation. Our new general manager or executive director. What exactly is your title? I'm sorry. So anyway, we'll be working with Harry. So we'll need a roll call vote if there's any further discussion.
Just to clarify, we don't actually need a roll call vote for formation of an ad hoc. That's within the chair's jurisdiction, and council would generally recommend we don't do a roll call vote for that. So I think we don't need any further action.
Okay, well, I'm just following the script.
I know. Sorry, that was on us.
All right. So with that, we have an ad hoc to work closely with Harry, consisting of the chair and vice chair of the board and the chair and vice chair of the TAC. So with that, Al.
I know this is maybe not where we were headed, but I never had an opportunity to speak with Harry, and so I did have one question that I would have liked to have asked about his experience.
Okay.
So maybe now would be an okay time.
This is a great time.
So in all your experience, you've managed a lot of things, and how do you feel you are at the critical issue of cost containment?
I think every organization that I was associated with got smaller over time, and we found ways of being more efficient to do the work of government, and particularly at West Kern, we did staff reductions just through attrition and not rehiring, but challenging people to take on more and using innovation to stretch limited budgets. I'm very sensitized to the necessity of that here, and quite frankly, it's probably my, it's my guiding light in terms of how we move forward. So I'm working with Indigo already about efficiencies that I think will minimize our need to engage on work, and so that it's not just a new consciousness for me in terms of operating that way. It's just part and parcel to how I manage my personal life and professional life. So it's not a stretch to extend, that kind of approach to management here.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Yes.
Moving forward, one of the things I would like to see is a budget that's more transparent. In looking at our budget and trying to figure out all the contracts we have, how much this group, how much we're paying this group, how much this group, where things
Can you lean a little bit more in the microphone? We're missing every other
where
word.
things fall budget-wise. It's very, very difficult to look at this budget and figure out what's going on in this organization. And so moving forward, I would like to see the group work with Harry on having a more transparent budget so that anyone can look at it and,
Sure.
and know where our money's going.
We're going to have a discussion on that on item E, so I think that would be a good time for us to take it up, but I think everyone
I
agrees
didn't
with
want to
you.
go into specifics. I just wanted a broad comment regarding the group and Harry getting together and moving forward.
Okay, we'll bring it up again and get a little bit more specific. I don't think you're alone in your concerns, and I agree with you that it's something that whenever we're spending the public's money, we want to be as transparent as possible. So we'll have a chance to talk about that.
And I just want to add, Teresa, it would be my commitment to meet your expectation in that regard. I agree with you that there are different ways to present the numbers in a way that are more understandable by vendor type. And I think that's what you're looking for, and I want to make sure that we satisfy your concerns in that regard. So.
Okay, good. All right, so with that, we're going to move on to our next item on our agenda, which is item B, Monitoring and Water Year 2023 Annual Report. And we will have our consultants, unless staff has something to say first. If not, we will hear from Audra and possibly Laura as well.
Great, thank you very much. Good morning to the Board of Directors. I can go ahead and give a quick overview of the annual report. We will keep it focused on groundwater, excuse me, as I prepare to share here, on the groundwater levels and talk a little bit about incorporation of some of the continuous sensor data into this year's annual report. All right, so we're going to be covering the water year 2023 annual report that was prepared and submitted as of April 1st, 2024 to DWR, which was the deadline. And again, this is going to cover October 2022 through the end of September 2023. All right, and so just as a reminder for the types of things, the information, the topics that are included in the annual report, we're reporting on the GSA's progress toward GSP implementation. We also added a section this year to discuss the recommended corrective actions that DWR indicated in their letter to the GSP and the efforts that have been made so far by the GSA to attain and make progress towards those corrective actions. We also take a look at the various data that are collected from the monitoring networks throughout the basin, and then also summarize data that we obtain from partner agencies like the City of Ukiah and others, information regarding groundwater extractions, surface water diversions, estimated total water use, and estimated changes in total groundwater storage. All right, so to give some quick context on how things were looking in water year 2023, there was slightly above average precipitation detected at all of the gauges, precipitation gauges throughout the basin. And compared to the prior year, we saw that there was substantial improvement in drought conditions. And so this is a graphic produced by the US Drought Monitor for California, and we can see Ukiah indicated approximately with a star, and we can see how different conditions were in April 2022 compared to a year ago, April 2023. And I just checked this morning conditions, and we are again not in drought conditions. We've had a couple of winters of really good precipitation. So again, we're in quite a different place that we were a couple of water years ago. All right, so some of the metrics that we examine using the sustainable management criteria that are described in the basin's GSP include these: groundwater elevation, groundwater storage, the quality of groundwater in the basin, the condition of interconnected surface waters, and then also land subsidence, which we consider not much of an issue for this basin. So today I'm really going to focus on groundwater elevation since it is such an important metric for understanding sustainability in the basin. Okay, and so here I just want to give a reminder of what our representative monitoring point network looks like. These are the locations that we actually compare against sustainability, the sustainable management criteria that are described in the GSP. We do have a larger network of locations that the Mendocino County RCD measures throughout the year, but those are not yet, those have not had SMCs, these management criteria, developed for those locations as of yet. That is something that we'd be looking to do in our periodic evaluation in 2027. So again, right now we have 7 sites. Something that we have discussed in the past is that one of these locations was a DWR well that had been destroyed during a construction project. We have since selected Ukiah Valley 36. It's screened to the same aquifer. It's not too distant. It's another mid-basin location to act as a replacement for the time being. We do not yet have sustainable management criteria developed for this location, but we've discussed and coordinated with DWR regarding this selection. All right, the other thing that has happened is that we have these 5 additional continuous sensor wells, and this was the first time that we incorporated data from these continuous sensors into the annual report. So these had only been installed as of very, very late 2021, early 2022, so we finally had sufficient data to be able to include them. Okay. And so again, just a reminder, we're going to take a look at our representative monitoring point well locations for groundwater elevation, and we're going to be comparing them against different sustainability indicators to get a sense for how conditions were looking throughout the basin in water year 2023. And so there are 3 different indicators that are identified in the GSP. So this trigger level is sort of a way for the GSA to check out how conditions are looking in a given well after winter and spring recharge has occurred. And so again, this is non-regulatory. It's just to sort of see if things appear to be on track. The second of the 3 criteria are this measurable objective. This is a regulatory value that was identified and developed in the GSP. And again, we want to be above this groundwater elevation and in order to make sure that we're on track to attain sustainability within the next 20 years. And then one of sort of the really warning values that we worry about is the minimum threshold. And so this is the value below which groundwater elevations, if they fall, we start to get concerned that the site is not on track to attain sustainability and action needs to be taken. We've discussed before in previous meetings the fact that sort of transient dips below this minimum threshold do not mean that the GSA is in non-compliance, but that we should take notice and try to address those low groundwater elevations.
Quick question, Audra. So what is RMP for everyone?
Oh, yep. Monitoring point. Those are the official wells in our monitoring network for which we have the sustainable management criteria described in the GSP. So we hope to expand this network, the RMP network, in subsequent GSP updates, periodic evaluation.
So
this is
when this is at its full capacity, how many RMP?
14 more. I mean, other basins usually have, Laura could speak to this a little bit better. Other basins usually have tens of RMPs.
Yeah, I think, Glenn, in Ukiah probably is one of the basins with the smallest number of RMPs right now, just because we didn't have the data in the past. So even in the GSP, we wrote that we were going to improve the RMP network with time.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
and the reason why we had only so few is because if you remember, we had only 4 points, 6 points with a long time series. That's it. Sorry, Audra.
oh no, not at all. And so that's absolutely something that the GSA has been working towards by, as you'll see, installation of other continuous sensors. Mendocino County RCD has been working hard to carry out monthly measurements. It's at our broader monitoring network. So we are on track to be able to add RMP locations in the 2027 periodic evaluation. So this is good. And again, when we're thinking about having an undesirable result that's identified in the GSP, we would have to be in a situation where more than 1/3 of the RMP wells fall below their respective minimum thresholds as kind of basement for where we want to see, very minimum where we want to see groundwater elevations for 2 years in a row. And so we're going to take a look at how things have been looking at our representative monitoring points for the past several years and where we are as of water year 2023. Okay, and so in order to do that, we're going to look at something called a hydrograph. This is looking at the trends in groundwater elevation through time. And you'll see, just like Laura was describing, that the length of these records varies depending upon the well that we're looking at. Some of them only go back to, say, maybe 2015, whereas others may go back several decades. And so we want to be able to develop these records in order to set reasonable, sustainable management criteria. And that's what we're hoping to do at additional sites in coming years. All right. And so when we look at this, one of the great things is that, again, because RCD has been able to obtain monthly measurements at many more sites over the last couple of years, this gives us a much better picture of annual sort of interseasonal, month-to-month fluctuations. And we'll see towards the end of the presentation that having continuous sensor data gives us an even clearer picture of what's happening at these different sites, or has the opportunity to. And what we notice is that a couple of sites did have fairly pronounced seasonal lows, but the remaining 4 look like they're right on track. And the areas that tended to be most problematic were towards the north portion of the basin and Redwood Valley, and one of our sites that we've been keeping an eye on, Ukiah Valley 1 near Lake Mendocino. The other thing that we hope to do is utilize the model as it's getting updated right now for another project, utilize the model to better understand some of these dynamics and why we might be seeing some of these seasonal lows and what could possibly be done in the project management action space to help alleviate them. All right, so I want to also note that on the hydrographs, again, the water elevation through time that I'm going to show, I've indicated the October 2023 measurements with a red arrow, just to kind of be able to sort of have a guidepost as we look through these hydrographs. All right, so here is, we're going to kind of go from bottom to top in Aquifer 1 and then top to bottom for Aquifer 2. So you can see here we are at Ukiah Valley 32. This is our southernmost location in Aquifer 1. And we did have some really nice recovery during water year 2023, well above this trigger level, just as we want to see. We did not approach either the measurable objective or the minimum threshold. Things are looking good at this location. Again, a very similar kind of pattern here for Ukiah Valley 26. Also in Aquifer 1, we see that we have really nice recovery. We got a lot of precipitation. There is a summer dip, but we don't approach any of our levels of concern here. And then we have more recovery after the end of water year 2023 as we got more precipitation in the basin. So for this location, we need to coordinate better transfer of continuous sensor data with CLSI because of the equipment that's in place in this well, manual monthly measurements are not possible in the same way for, excuse me, for RCD. And so we here have actually, this is the November measurement, and you can see we're also in good shape at this location. But again, we hope in future years to have just a bit more detailed data to be able to present. All right, so this is a location that has been on the GSA's radar for the last couple of years. There have been some insights from TAC member Sean White that pumping of nearby wells are very likely inducing and influencing some of these low water level measurements that you can see here in the hydrograph that tend to occur kind of in the late summer, fall time period. So we can see that last water year, we had a multi-month deviation below the minimum threshold. It's not something that we want to see, something we need to keep an eye on. And again, we saw a similar multi-month deviation below the minimum threshold for this past water year 2023.
So I have a question, or perhaps Sean can explain what he.
Phones. But in all the previous year, it never near the measure monitoring by itself. Oh, the county water act less a site. The same time major day. I think without doing any sort of exhaustive investigation, it's well within the cone of depression now of well, and that's all we're measuring. And to me, we either need to take that into account and adjust our objectives or find another site. But there's really nothing problematic about this well, in my opinion. It's really just recording a changed condition that didn't exist, period.
Yeah, so it sounds like with the construction of the new well, it's when that well went online, then that's when our problem showed up.
Yeah, and I mean, again, it's not even a problem. If you look, it recovers during a normal year just like you would want. It's just the range of variation now is affected by active pumping happening.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, before we were measuring basically just static groundwater levels there because there was no influence of active diversion immediately. And now there is.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, previously we were just recording the unimpaired water level in this area, and now there's an active municipal well immediately adjacent to this site, and now that's what we're recording. But to record it as some, you know, or think about it as indicative of some kind of problem, to me, it is not really a fair description of what happening. It's just documenting a changed baseline condition, basically. But I'm happy to see that when it's actually raining, it does recover, and all of those things are good. I just think if we're going to continue to use that site, we may need to rethink the metrics that we use for establishing what's normal there, because the old normal isn't the normal.
Okay. So Laura, you have your hand up as well.
Yeah, no, actually, I was going exactly in the direction Sean went. I feel like we should keep monitoring for the next couple of years, and if really this is the new trend because of and it's really consistent, then we can even keep this well in our plan, but change the metrics because it's really just not represent the previous metrics is not representative anymore. So totally agree with Sean.
Okay.
Did make a note. Oh, excuse me.
Audra, go ahead. Unless there's other questions at this point on this particular spot? No? Okay, great. Oh, wait, Doug.
One of the things that continues to trouble me about our challenge for us is the date certain of the legislation doesn't coincide with our water use. And our geology doesn't conform to the norm for the problem this state is trying to address. I think it's really important that we work towards being able to get closer to sea level with our trigger and our use volumes. Because of the, here we sit 600 feet more or less above sea level, so saltwater intrusion's not an issue. We're in a graben, which has many humongous tons of water retaining or water holding, primarily aggregates that are a result of the graben being filled in by the flows from primarily Lake County, the Clear Lake area. And we're being tarred with the same brush. We need to be mindful about finding a way to move that water level that we can utilize closer to sea level. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Audra, if you'd like to continue.
All right, thank you. I did want to note, so I appreciate the input from the board members, and also want to note that we did include some of the information that Sean had indicated in our annual report, so that was in the record as well, that there were changing conditions with regard to the well field adjacent to this location. All right. Okay, so this is now moving on to looking at conditions in Aquifer 2. So because the record for this particular well is quite a bit longer, we're going to go ahead and zoom in a bit so that we can see some of the detail over the past couple of years. So again, you can see nice recovery during spring and reflecting precipitation input to the basin, a summertime dip, but again, staying within that kind of central operating range. We do notice that at this location, unlike some of the others that we've seen, there is a deviation below the measurable objective, that green line, but we do have conditions remaining above the minimum threshold. Okay, so here's another, and this is a DWR well. Here's another DWR well, again with one of the longer records available in the basin. So we'll again zoom in so we can take a closer look at some of these results for recent years. This location again shows, especially this past water year, quite good recovery during those wet months, a dip during summer, but measurements essentially remain above the measurable objective, the green line. So we're in a good space at this location. All right, and so here are the results for Ukiah Valley 36, proposed replacement RMP that we mentioned in previous meetings, and then also in our annual report. We again have been meeting with DWR to coordinate with them about this update, because they were aware that the other DWR well we had in our network had been destroyed. So again, we do not yet have sustainable management criteria described for this location. That is likely something that will happen during our next big GSP update in 2027. So what we can see though is that kind of similar to the other locations, we have seasonal fluctuations, good recovery during winter, and this site actually remained pretty high in groundwater elevation throughout the summer as well, relative to its record.
Just a question, I guess, for Sean. So my understanding that the water level in correct?
In general, anywhere in city limits, proper groundwater is quite shallow. Depending on the time of year, this time of year, it's actually problematic for even shallow construction. And in the summer, I would say that range 30 and 60 feet below surface is pretty typical.
And talking with some of the old timers who are familiar with that area, they said it used to be kind of swampy actually before it was made into more urban use.
Yep, and we still have some of those areas. You know, Grace Hudson Museum and other areas are very persistent.
Okay, thank you.
Very interesting. Okay, so
what's the depth of the change from the less cemented aggregate fill of the valley and the more cemented layer? That's how many more feet roughly below what we've been harvesting? Still porous, but it holds less water.
That is not a question for me. That'd probably be a question for Laura. But all I can speak to are the wells that this has and my experience with them. And all of our new major generally extend about 205 to.
Tom, we're losing a little bit. You can just put that close.
Sorry, this is not the most ergonomic arrangement here. All of our newer municipal wells are generally in the neighborhood of 225 to 250 feet deep. All go through at least 3 different layers of fine to aquifer, or they pierce that many aquatards, whatever you want to call it. And really there's been no major difference in their water bearing capacity as we did well testing during their development. But different areas definitely produce different volumes of water. Like that spot there, that is the city's well 9. In the same.
And where is 9?
Yeah, the same identical construction as
where
others.
Where is 9?
What's that?
What's the location of 9?
That is the one that's just past Home Depot there at the corner of the Brush Street Triangle. That well produces around 750 gallons a minute reliably, where we have others like well 4 that will produce 11 to 1,300 gallons per minute. And exactly, they were constructed at the same time to the same depth with the same casing and everything. So it's not unilateral, but I don't think we found any layers that produced significantly less than others. The things that you will find is the water quality amongst layers definitely varied. In this location, some of the layers, and particularly initially, at much higher levels of manganese and other things that were not necessarily ideal for municipal supply.
Right. Well 4 is Lorraine and Lorraine.
Correct, yes.
Is south of Gobi.
Yeah.
Question?
Yeah, I was going to address Doug's question. According to the state AEM data, it's roughly like 600 feet. In the Ukiah Basin, you hit the bottom of the bowl and it's impenetrable.
I understand that that varies depending upon where it is in relation to the, not fairly level, depends on where those.
Yeah, but in the actual Ukiah Valley, it's
Generally
roughly
speaking.
600 feet.
Yeah. But there is a difference at about 100 feet below ground level where that transition occurs. There's a study that was done, federal government did it in the mid-50s, reviewed some years ago. Gave me some more indications about what we have below us.
Okay, Audra, if you'd like to continue.
Sure, of course. So to give a quick snapshot overview of what conditions were looking like as of fall 2023, again, that's one of the critical periods for our basin and many others with regard to groundwater level, after we've had summer pumping and no precipitation in antecedent months. To summarize what we looked at together going through the hydrographs, the four most southern wells in our representative monitoring point network all look like they are doing well and had values above that measurable objective. We're on track. Ukiah Valley 36 does not yet have criteria described. Ukiah Valley 1, as we heard from TAC member Sean White, has unique conditions that are causing it to have a water level that falls below than a minimum threshold. And this is going to be kind of a continuing issue that we're going to grapple with, perhaps reassessing the sustainable management criteria in the future. Up in Redwood, oh, excuse me, there is a typo there, I apologize. The DWR location up in Redwood Valley did have a fall water level that dipped below the measurable objective, that MO, but it remained above the minimum threshold. So it's kind of in that central operating space. So nothing critical, but it did dip a little bit. Again, we do see good recovery during wet months at all locations. All right. And so again, we are not in a situation where we have an undesirable result. That would be at least 1/3 of the locations for 2 consecutive years. But we do need to just be addressing the Ukiah Valley 1 situation with our annual reports and perhaps in communication with DWR. All right. And so I did want to touch briefly, if we do have sufficient time, I do want to pause and check in maybe with Indigo. If we have sufficient time to talk about some of the continuous sensor data.
Yeah, we do have enough time. Let's even though we're falling a little bit behind schedule, let's go ahead and touch.
Okay, thank you. So I do want to note that we have these 5 DWR technical support services grant funded locations where sensors and telemetry were installed. 2 of these locations are nested wells and so have multiple depths that can be measured and monitored. And this is the first time that we were able to incorporate continuous sensor data into the annual report. And so that was a very exciting change. And we hope, again, to be expanding our continuous sensor network to reduce the kind of monthly burden of needing to go out and actually physically monitor these locations over time. And it also does give a nice amount of data that can help improve model outputs and also show us in detail what's happening at these different locations and get a better sense for overall basin conditions. And so just a quick note that unfortunately one of these locations did require some maintenance and we were not able to process the data in time for the annual report, but we did include data from these other locations. Okay, so to give a sense for the responsiveness of the continuous sensor data, I wanted to look through and show precipitation records that were measured in the basin relative to the groundwater elevation at a few of these different locations. So right now, let's just zoom back. So we're looking at first the Ukiah Valley GSA 06 location that's towards the top of the basin here. And we're just looking in well A of this multi-completion well. So this is the shallowest well in the series. And you can see how responsive the groundwater elevation is. Doesn't change a whole lot. Only we're looking at maybe 3 feet in range over this total record, but we see it's very responsive to precipitation inputs.
Question.
Yes, please.
Location of well 36. Or
Of well 36?
Where is that located?
06 or 36?
36, I'm sorry.
Oh, 36. So 36, that is that new RMP site. So that is mid-basin. You know what? I need to look in more detail. I think I have it. Here we go. This is that one that was the municipal well number 9. Are you talking about the new RMP well? Sorry, there's so many numbers. Is this what you were referencing? Okay.
Thank you.
No problem at all. And we, just to be clear, we do not yet have, or we do not have a continuous sensor in this location. I was just noting the location so that we can kind of see some of the other network updates that have been occurring. All right. So next we'll look at Ukiah Valley Basin GSA 05. This is closer to Lake Mendocino. And here we can see there's a little bit more spread in terms of the range in groundwater elevation that's reported during this time period of about 2022 to the end of 2023. And again, we see really a lot of responsiveness to precipitation outputs. So we had a sense of this, absolutely, in this basin, knowing that winter recovery is something that we expect to see in the wells, but you can really see that condition emphasized in these continuous sensor plots. Okay, and we'll wrap it up here. Just wanted to show another location lower down in the basin, this GSA-02. Again, we see a bit more fluctuation in terms of groundwater elevation, but really a lot of response to precipitation. And to keep it moving here, this is a site, UVB GSA-01, the shallowest well of the multi-completion wells. At this location, we see the greatest range in groundwater elevation at this site. And again, we see very responsive to precipitation inputs. So I will go ahead and pause there. Again, I just wanted to give a quick sense of what some of this continuous sensor data is looking like at different points throughout the basin, and emphasize that we are now able to start incorporating it into our reporting. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, any questions from board members? Okay, any questions from our TAC? All right. Any? Very well, then we'll continue. Are you finished with your report?
All set. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay. All right, well, with that, we'll accept the report. It doesn't require a motion. It's been filed. So what is the process now from Department of Water Resources? What will happen as they review this report, and what will they say?
They may get back to us with questions. We didn't get any question in the past years, so maybe no, or maybe we will have to just say something. But Dominic is, sorry, Dominic, I didn't see that you were there.
Yeah, no problem. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, so it was great meeting with you all quite recently to go over the recommended corrective actions, and kind of in the same vein, we'll be a lot more communicative as well about annual reports. So your annual report is being reviewed right now, and we'll be in touch. Yeah, that's about all I have. But if you have any questions for me about that, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions for Dominic from board members or?
Yeah, just a question, Dominic, on the timing of that feedback.
I'd expect the review to be done based on our current timeline, like Q2. So sometime maybe in Q3, you'd hear back of this year. But if that changes, I'll let you know.
Thank you.
Okay, with no further questions or comments, we'll move on to our next item, which is item C, the TAC Fee Study Recommendations. Beth.
Thank you. Beth Salamone, I'm the chair of the Technical Advisory Committee, and co-hosting with me today is Sean White, the vice chair. Before we move on to this item, I just wanted to ask if we could add Amber to our ad hoc committee.
Oh, certainly.
Thank you. Show that on the record. I have talked to her. She's willing to serve.
Okay.
Thank you, Amber. So the Technical Advisory Committee, also known as the TAC, I would like to note that there's a wide variety of membership in that, and with that, a variety of positions. But I'd like the board to know that despite these various positions, we may not agree on every single aspect. We did come to consensus on the recommendations that we're presenting today. I thought that was quite impressive. The TAC explored and identified, they explored some of the identified areas for improvement, and we prioritized the actions and we discussed some of the implementation. And all of this was in order to provide feedback on the project and management actions, or PMAs, to the board for your discussion later today on the rate and fee cost basis, so that you could adequately feel prepared to set that budget. I do want to mention, I think further refinement is needed on the implementation of the PMAs, including timing and grant-funded opportunities. But I believe we can start that work in this GM transition ad hoc committee and make recommendations to the board and the TAC about how to move forward. I want to thank Larry Walker and Associates for the slides, which were presented at the TAC, and I just tweaked them a little bit. So on to slide 2. Next slide, Harry. Harry's my slide mover here. We did meet with DWR, as has been mentioned in the meeting, and we're not going to go into depth on that at the moment, but it did influence a lot of the discussion. So this is just an overview of the DWR expectations for the periodic evaluation, which is due in January 2027. This is often called the 5-year update. It really is more of an evaluation. We're not expected to update the GSP unless we feel like we need to. So 2 of the main points here: anticipated improvements that are identified in the GSP, and the 5 corrective actions that DWR gave to us in the GSP approval letter. So you can find these anticipated improvements in an appendix, I believe, of the GSP. I would cite Harry as an assistant to find those. And I believe it might be linked in the TAC agenda packet from our previous meeting. What I'd like to note is there's overlap in these 2 categories, and you're going to see that in the coming slides. Slide, please. Oh, I can do it. Hello? Okay. So the anticipated improvements identified in the GSP: well construction information, including a well inventory, groundwater elevation, a water budget, expanding on the water budget, depletion of interconnected surface water monitoring network, and stream network and hydrologic data. So these are things that we identified ourselves in that. And I just want to pause here and see, Sean, if you want to jump in at any point, please do. No? Okay. Next slide. Thank you. And then we have the DWR recommended corrective actions. In bold are the 2 that we are really going to focus on: updating the water budget and improving characterization of the interconnected surface waters. Number 2, 3, and 5 are important, but they are being managed through the update by Larry Walker and Associates, and so we didn't focus on those as much. These 2 are overlapping with the other improvement areas. So the TAC had, as I said, a thorough discussion, and we identified these priorities that we need to focus on, particularly for funding in the rate and fee study cost basis. An expanded and enhanced monitoring network, interconnected surface water, or the ISW study, and a well inventory. And the primary focus here is filling the data gaps. And with that, I'd like to pause for a second and ask Sean to talk a little bit about some of the feedback he provided in the TAC meeting, which I felt was very important, particularly prioritizing this monitoring network, expanding the continuous monitoring equipment. And you said something I thought, I wrote it down in a quote, low financial contribution for big results.
Yeah, thank you. As we look at the information or information that we have or don't have, some of the things that we don't have, I think will provide a really big bang for the buck if we do them in a way that will both reduce staff time and effort while also providing a much higher resolution data set. In particular, just moving all of our monitoring sites and future monitoring sites to robots, basically. So using some sort of pressure transducer to record these things. I do, having used all sorts of telemeter things in the past, it is important to still visit these things in the field regularly to make sure they haven't been damaged or dead. But that requires a lot less time than actually taking the measurements, and in between we get a much higher resolution of data than we have just by doing things twice a year. And the cost for these, and LWA, feel free to jump in at any time, I think that was around $20,000 to automate the entire system, and the bang for the buck there I think is just fantastic. With much better data, less staff time, and just a lot more information that can be used later as we go into model refinement. Having that level of resolution will give us a way better output in the future. So that was one of the things that I think I was advocating for, but we had also wide support at the TAC for moving away from manual reads and getting into automated transducer-based readings.
Sean, how often are the well elevations sampled? What's the interval when automated?
I mean, down menu tool, and you use battery power or to the app, or probably good enough for our endeavor. Any of those things provides much more informed data than one day, twice a year. That's just missing a lot of information. The slides Audra showed from the continuous wells just shows exactly how much more information you get and how things respond to precipitation and summer drawdown and all of those things. Any of them are just significantly better than one day, twice a year.
And there's no cone of depression information that comes out of what we do currently at all.
I'm sorry?
There's no cone of depression information. Can't, 2 snapshots a year.
Yeah, exactly.
You get nothing.
Yeah.
In terms of that information.
It's just a lot more information than we get now for a small amount of money and less staff time.
Okay.
Any other questions on the expanded and enhanced monitoring network as shown in the slide? And this is just an overview of information. Touching again on the DWR recommended corrective actions, number 1 and number 4, just showing here that this will be part of the evaluation done by Larry Walker and Associates for the update. A little bit more information of there. We do have 2 more slides regarding the well inventory and the ISW study, if there's interest in seeing them. But basically, going back to the TAC identified priorities slide. Sorry, Harry, I'm moving all over. These are the 3 points that the TAC recommended. filling the data gaps, again, being the priority, and selecting actions with overlapping benefits and that are showing progress. Their recommendations came out from the TAC, such as using students to do some of the early desktop studies of the well inventory and other studies. The California Land Stewardship Institute has some remaining funding available. Laurel Marcus has offered several times to work with us on using that funding to meet some of our data gaps. And she also mentioned creating a data request form, a voluntary data request form that could go out to pumpers, so if they were willing to share information. And I know Laurel's working a lot on another project, which I won't go into today, regarding that. Again, looking at the areas that would be beneficial for grant funding, which would be most likely the ISW study. I think the important thing we learned from the conversation with DWR is that we need to be showing progress. And I'd like to ask Sean to just touch upon one of his major points in the TAC meeting, which was the progress that we actually have already made. We want to acknowledge that and not dismiss that. It's not starting from today. We have been making progress. Sean?
Sure. You know, in our last meeting, as we looked to sort of figure out how to get our budget much more manageable, the PMAs were driving a lot of the expense. And it wasn't just the PMAs themselves, but the schedule for implementation of those PMAs. And I think both the board and the TAC had sort of a divergent opinion with staff at the time on really how quickly those things needed to be rolled out. Eric in particular wanted to be fairly aggressive and sort of really move towards almost full implementation by the 5-year update. And we were sort of more in the mindset of, I don't know that we need to be done at 5 years, but we do need to make demonstrable progress at 5 years. So we had a meeting actually with DWR to really talk through those things and see, you know, what was their expectation. And after that meeting, it became clear that we really just needed to make demonstrable progress. We didn't necessarily have to have things be completed. And through that process, we went through the list of, I think there are 5 sort of conditions that were in our approval letter, and really looked at each of those bullet items in the letter. And we had actually made significant progress on implementing all of them already. And that really allowed us to, one, feel a little bit more comfortable that we were on track for having positive things to report at our 5-year update, kind of roll back the schedule for implementation, which also helped with our budget, but also helped us focus on the things that maybe we do kind of want to work on in the next 5 years, which are kind of the things that Beth is highlighting in this slide, which we think will be the things that will help us do a better job in the subsequent 15 years. So we think if we do these things and roll them out, which are actually some of the less expensive PMAs, we'll actually have a much better direction in the subsequent 15 years and be able to save a significant amount of money all at the same time.
And that concludes our presentation, unless you have questions.
There are questions. So online we have Devin Bohr.
Mendocino County Farm Bureau asked this question since I appreciate the TAC taking a look. The board taking a look at all these recommendations. I was just wondering, data report, has there been sort of an overlook, or excuse me, an overlap with determining which specific wells might be best for going with telemetry?
Yeah, if I can, I think at the TAC we basically, Devin recommended all of them. You know, to implement them to all of the wells was a very reasonable cost because the instruments themselves are simply not that expensive nowadays, and we all thought it would be worthwhile just doing it all.
Okay, how about, I'm sorry, I should have asked board members, are there questions from the board on Beth's presentation? Sure, go ahead.
Any consideration of finding a location for monitoring that is maximum practical distance from all wells?
To my knowledge, there's not been a discussion of that, but that's not a bad idea. But I think right now, one of our limitations is we don't really know where all the wells are, which is sort of why we're looking at prioritizing this well inventory. You know, I think knowing where everything is just kind of this fundamental thing that we need to know. But when we were looking at this, it is going to be a very tedious task, and this is one of the areas where at the TAC we felt like this is a great opportunity to utilize a graduate student or someone, you know, like the city has partnered with UC Davis and gotten absolutely fantastic output for the dollar, and it just seemed like a much more efficient way to do it than paying a consultant to do it. But to get to your question, Doug, without knowing where everything is, it's very hard to identify where that spot is, you know. And I think this Ukiah Valley #1 is a great example of having something entirely divorced from diversions or as close as possible would be a great objective.
So just another comment on that. Over time, I'm sure we can come up with some very interesting spatial and temporal multivariate analysis when we have lots and lots of numbers that could lead to that question, the answer to that question, which would take a lot of computer power, but we're starting to gather data now that will make it possible, especially as we add to the network. Devin, do you still have another question? I see your hand up.
Yes, sorry, I apologize. Devin Bohr, Mendocino County Farm Bureau. So I accidentally hit my phone to turn off my question. So in terms of, I heard Sean's response, I appreciate that. I'm moving towards telemetry with, you know, a majority of the wells in the system. Was there a time frame, or is that going to be an all at once sort of approach? Or, you know, within the budget conversations later, I know there was some additions looking at the recommendations from the TAC. So, you know, was that kind of a stepped up process over the next several years, or what was the thought on that?
Devin, I believe the way it is in the budget, that's all done in the first year. There was an item added to just get it done immediately so we could start having improved data right away.
I would just add to that, we're taking that up as a budget amendment here shortly.
Okay. Any more questions from the board? Any more questions from in the room? I don't see anything online, so with that, thank you very much for the time that the TAC has taken, and first of all, to discuss this and then organize your thoughts and give it a presentation to the board in a very coherent manner that we can follow. And I think that with this, we've clarified some of our differences between staff and our membership about what our expectations are for us going forward to expend money to be compliant with the GSA regulations. This is a really significant achievement here, and thank you very much for all that you've done.
Thank you, and I just want to reiterate that the TAC, in alignment with the board's opinion, is that we address the improvements needed, mostly gathering data in these priorities here, but doing it at the most efficient, financially, you know, funding efficient way, because we recognize that it's our constituents that are going to be paying these rates and fees, so we are working really hard to keep those costs manageable. It's very important to the TAC.
All right, thank you. Yes, Al?
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge the TAC for bringing their recommendations to us directly. Until now, we've always gotten a report of what the TAC said or did and recommended, and that was always really murky. So this is great, and I hope that it continues going forward.
Well, we can certainly do that. We can certainly have the TAC report out directly at meetings, which I think you're right is a good way to do it. It's a significant investment of time on their part. And it also makes it a little bit clearer sometimes when we're trying to communicate what transpired in their meeting. And I think their meeting was epic. I mean, I actually watched the whole thing on YouTube, and it was a very good meeting. I mean, it's probably one of the greatest hits we have so far for Ukiah Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency. So I really appreciate what you've done. Okay. Question, Teresa.
So you said that the recommendations come with a budget amendment to adopt them immediately. Is there any reason why adopting them immediately, other than just a little more monitoring data, versus just putting it into the next budget and doing it a little more cleanly, full budget versus amending our current budget?
So we're going to discuss that in the next agenda item. So
the next agenda item is the budget, but
Right.
I'm asking the TAC team their recommendation for amending this one versus doing it in our next fiscal year budget.
in other words, you'd like to see this implemented now as opposed to waiting?
No, I'd like it not to amend an existing budget, but have it start at a new budget, because the whole purpose of this telemetry is to save money, right? So I don't want to just spend and not see the savings within the same budget, right? I want to see, okay, we're spending an additional $25,000 here. We're going to save $10,000 here on staff time or contracted staff time, what have you, and I'm not seeing that. So that's a budget conversation, but I'm asking the TAC team. They said they recommended doing this immediately versus just planning it into the next fiscal year.
I see what you're saying.
I just might add a little color to it. So from a revenue standpoint, it's relatively neutral. It's a cost that we are going to expend at some point. The value in doing it now is just starting to build as soon as possible the data that we need to create a more robust network. And so I think there is value in doing it now, Teresa, from the standpoint of informing the model a little bit better, starting to develop that history of hydrographic information that will better characterize the basin. My 2 cents.
Okay. Well, why don't we move on to that next item, which is budget adjustments. So, Harry, you can talk about the budget adjustments that you're concerned or recommending.
Okay, so a lot of preamble to the necessity for in round numbers $35,000 to add monitoring equipment and repair or maintain existing equipment. And so I'm starting with the expense side. So that amounts to $35,000 of additional budget that we need to install those early. In addition to that, we have out-of-scope work that has been expended for technical expenses, providing technical feedback to DWR's corrective actions, meetings with CDFW, work on the Western Hills Land Acquisition Grant Program and guidance to MCRCD. So the net expenses that we're suggesting for the budget.
Just a second.
Sure.
We're not seeing the same screen monitors, so.
I need to take control of the screen, or? Okay. Gonna start over?
There we are, that's it.
Okay, great. So on the expense side, the $12,000 is for out-of-scope work for the consultants in simple terms. The $35,000 is a combination of new telemetry and repair work, totaling $47,000. That nets against a new revenue line item of $5,000 that we're anticipating from City of Ukiah for for their share of costs associated with the Western Hills acquisition grant application with CDFW. Nets out to $42,000.
Okay, Teresa?
One of the things you mentioned was additional work that needs to be done on the grant application for the Western Hills. And I'm wondering, I didn't see anything else on that, except it mentioned a couple times in the different documents. I'm wondering what that is.
Yeah, I think I might have mischaracterized that. I think that, and maybe Sean, you can speak to that. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Indigo. Laura, you want me to just add them? Okay, Laura, are you hearing this discussion? We're looking for some additional commentary. Go ahead.
I didn't hear Indigo. Did she say something or? Otherwise, I think Audra, you wrote the application with City of Ukiah. You probably can provide all the details.
Yeah, so what happened is that we submitted an application for two separate properties that the City of Ukiah had identified as being ideal for acquisition in Western Hills. CDFW said that they were looking favorably on the application, except for the fact that one of the locations required quite a lot more restoration than was initially anticipated. City of Ukiah was able to actually send staff out to assess the location. There was a huge amount of debris and road issues at a former illegal cannabis grow site that was targeted. So the decision was made after conversations with CDFW to divide the application, that one of the sites could move forward in a quicker way through the process. We had to separate out the information for each of these, resubmit for the location that was a much more straightforward purchase from a private landowner. The other location, I prepared some materials so that City of Ukiah can now take responsibility and submit the application for the former cannabis grow site, should they be able to work out an agreement with the current landowner. So that was some of the additional work that was required for the West.
So is this the financial responsibility of this board and the City of Ukiah? Because this was the city, and we were just we've already funded $30,000 towards grant application.
Sean, any thoughts?
Yeah, and I can work with Harry on this, but I think there was a significant misunderstanding with the previous general manager. While this is a City of Ukiah project, if you look at any of the PMAs in the GSP, they are all headed by some partner entity. And the city was actually approached by the GSA about pursuing this opportunity as part of their function of accomplishing PMAs that are in the GSP. This was not a city spearheaded thing. One of the PMAs is acquisition of open space in the Western Hills, because the Western Hills is largely what drives recharge of our aquifer. So while it's a quote city project, it's good for everyone. So we were approached by the GSA, and they said, "Do you mind if we take this on?" I said, "No. If you are in the mood to pursue it, have at it, and we're happy to assist you technically in any way we can." And they did, honestly, a tremendous job. I do understand that some of it went a bit sideways, and I think the city is willing to contribute, but any one of the things in the GSP is going to be either a county or another municipality, or somebody is going to be the partner with the GSA. This one just happens to be a city one, but this is not a city-led endeavor.
So there was miscommunication to this board then by our last general manager
Yes.
about this specific project and how it was being funded.
Yes.
Because I specifically remember and commenting personally that if this was a land acquisition for the city, they should share in the cost. Absolutely, 100%, and that's the only way we approved it. But now, according to Sean, it wasn't that way. So I have a real problem with how this has happened and the accountability here. And I know it's not the city's fault. I know it's how our general manager was communicating to us. And that falls on a company we're paying for our general manager, right? You see issue, this is an issue. It's a big issue. I don't want to spend $50,000 on a grant, A, we're not going to get, or B, that we're going to have to keep spending more money on. And if the idea from the general manager is that we acquire this land, if we're using Prop 26, I'm pretty sure we're not allowed to acquire land. We'd have to go into Prop 218. So I see a lot of issues here, and this raises a lot of concern for me. And so I kind of take it that no, the city wouldn't. Would the city financially contribute to the next $12,000 we need for this grant? I think that's what we're looking at. B, do they plan on paying the $5,000 that our last general manager told us they were committed to, which I don't know for a fact?
We never committed to that, but I'm happy to work with Harry about it so we can all move forward. But I do want to stress that one of the things that came out of the TAC in an effort to keep the budget here under control is when we see opportunities to make progress on one of the PMAs that's in the GSP, and we have an opportunity with a reasonable likelihood to do that through a grant, I think it's worth doing. And I'm not just talking about our Western Hills. There's a number of them that I think we can do well in a grant and take that financial burden off of our constituency. So I don't want to come across thinking I'm opposed to using grants. You know, they're always speculative, but sometimes the opportunity is absolutely worth pursuing. I mean, the city itself has done great pursuing grants, and our region as generally a DAC has a huge advantage in getting them. I think in this particular instance, our first site was honestly not successful, largely because the seller was not totally forthright in some of the liabilities of that property. Yeah, I think the way it was communicated both to this board and to myself, honestly, was not entirely clear. I don't know that any of it was necessarily intentionally misleading, but it was certainly a bit of a tail-chasing sort of exercise. Where you guys want to go from here, I don't know, but I do think if in the future, not just this PMA, but kind of any of them, we should be encouraging whoever's running the GSA at that point to look for those opportunities, because I think we can get a lot of the work we need to get done executed through outside money and help keep our rates low. But they are always, you know, a bit of a gamble.
Through the chair, Sean, could you clarify to address Teresa's question about Prop 26 and 218? In this case, for the Western Hills, the city would own that land.
Yes.
The GSA would not be
I
acquiring that
understand
land.
that.
Okay, I just wanted
He implied
to.
that the GSA was seeking the land and using the city for them to purchase it. And that was never communicated to us, how that was spearheaded. So
Yeah.
I feel a little duped at this point as a board member.
Yeah, I think the ownership issue would be totally normal and tidy. Is really just using GSA staff time to pursue the money. But again, I think we're all in agreement that we can do better in the future on how all that's communicated.
Teresa, I would agree with you that it was not well described or clear, and we've had, obviously it's in the past now, but certainly we had really different opinions with our former staff about how to pursue our PMAs, and it's really clear now, I think, from this lesson, we really need to tighten up our process so that we don't end up in a situation where the board's not really clear what we're applying grant monies for. So I think that that's something that we will work on as a policy, and be sure that as we talk about our budgets in the future, they're much more detailed than what we have right now. And I think that that's the goal. Again, we're spending the public's money. We want transparency to be number one priority, right up there with effectiveness of spending money. Al?
So, in looking at the budget, I just think about like when we do a budget for the vineyard, you look at like, well, what did we spend last year on this? That's our budget for next year, kind of thing. And you know, there's things in the budget that just carry through, which you wonder, well, how much did we spend? You know, like legal, for example, $40,000. Will we be spending 40,000? Are we coming close to spending 40? Is that just a number that we could have in reserve in case we need to spend it? And if we want to like up our expenditure on some other stuff or cover things like the technical support that we needed, can we shave some of these other items by $5,000 or whatever, you know, to massage that a bit, because we don't really know how much is left in
Harry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think there will be clarity and more transparency when we start producing monthly financial statements. If we opened up the profit and loss right now, I think a lot of that stuff would become clear. I think in terms of, take legal, for example, I think their budget is 40. I think they've spent about 30. If we open the financial statements, it should reflect that. And so it will be our practice going forward that you will see those statements, and that's really at the direction and insistence of the ad hoc committee. So I hope that will help going forward.
So I'm uncomfortable passing a budget amendment where A, I can't see what we've actually spent, what we have remaining, where we can move things around. B, passing that amendment to increase items where the city would talk to you about maybe contributing financially. I think those things should be hammered out before I commit money from the people in this valley towards that. I mean, that should have been done. You know, if the city said, okay, we'll contribute 2,000, our line item should be 10,000, not 12, right? So I'm just thinking that's something that should have been worked out before this came before us. And I want to see a more thorough picture of the budget. The last information I have of actual spent is July 23 to December 23. So I don't have, you know what I mean? Oh, there we go. So is that something that can be put into the budget format we're looking at when you show us the budget? Right, so this one, so I have this.
Yeah.
Actuals, budget,
right.
Spent, you know, deficits, are in an easy to read format that's super transparent.
Yeah, I think and that's what I was speaking to initially, Teresa, was just, you know, my commitment to start providing it in a way that you can defend, you can understand, and you can represent.
Supervisor or Commissioner White?
The increases that were being targeted there, that's to pay bills, right, that are outstanding.
Yes, it's to pay, it's first, most of it is to pay for telemetry equipment that is new and then repair of existing. There's $12,000 that is out of scope work that the consultants are requesting for work that went beyond their currently approved budget amounts.
So at least 12,000 of it is an invoice that needs to be satisfied.
Correct.
Okay. I agree with Teresa on a lot of this, but I also look at the bottom that we still have money left. We have this budget. We didn't zero out at the end of our season. And so I'm not as uncomfortable moving forward with this, knowing that we will have a much transparent measuring of how we proceed from here. And I don't like to make people wait for payment.
The $35,000 we're going to spend on well telemetry, that will show us some sort of savings because it should decrease man hours, right, Sean?
In theory, yes.
Yeah, where's the decrease in the budget due to that?
I guess I would respond, it's, I think it'll show up in expense line items for reduced monitoring going forward. I mean, we could make estimates to that effect, but more than the savings, though, is the importance to expand the monitoring network and increase the data. That is, I think, way more of value to this GSA than the incidental savings that would occur because of reduced monitoring costs. I don't mean to trivialize those, but the real value is to get more data so that we can self-govern.
I understand that. It's just that, does that have to be done now? Because, this is a big, long plan, lots of years that the state gave us to do this.
Yeah.
And given the current economic situation, I just saw a report yesterday or this morning that, inflation went up another 3.5%. We're in a bad spot economically, not just this nation and this state, but this valley as a DAC community, right? DAC community. So while it is important and it's part of a good long-term plan, I just want to be super hyper sensitive to all of the money we are spending that is going to go onto the back of every person that lives in this valley.
And let's see, Doug and then Sean, and then Adam.
And the other side of that, the devaluation of the currency we lovingly call inflation, is that if we postpone it, it will probably cost substantially more to do. And that will fall on the backs of our rate. So, I mean, we're in that devil if we do, devil if we don't situation.
Okay, Sean?
Yeah, and my only thing I would say about that, I don't disagree with the premises that Director McNerlin is expressing. We have a couple of nice wet years on our hand, which haven't been all that frequent around these parts lately, and I would love to harvest the high quality data during this window because they've been unfortunately not very regular lately, and I think it will be really good data to have as we look forward to updating and refining the model. That was one of the reasons that I was hopeful to get it in sooner than later.
Okay, Adam?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, I mean, I guess I feel more comfortable about it just because I've been a part of the ad hoc with Harry, and I think, Harry's inherited some of the issues like this, lack of information from previous general manager, that I feel a lot better going forward, that we just, like Glenn had said, we need a better process, which we are working on going forward. And, like Doug said too, it's going to cost us more. You know, if inflation continues to go up, then it's actually kind of better because our money's stronger now to pay for it. Otherwise, it's just going to cost us more. And just going in the future, the more, like, this is kind of the foundation information that we need to make better informed decisions down the road that will affect even more money, like where we're going to put those precious pennies on. Especially like Sean's saying, it's, you know, we're really lucky it's been raining, but that could change as soon as next year. And not knowing, you know, it is, I think, more valuable to have that information as soon as possible.
And the more data points that we have that are up here,
Yeah.
the better likelihood that we can adjust thresholds. So that's all in the favor of the basin and the consumer. So
Yeah.
That's excellent information, and thank
Yeah.
you. And I do appreciate having Sean and Beth both here presenting to us and answering our questions. And that explanation does make total sense.
I mean, in the long term, it's not going to make a huge, like Harry said, it's neutral in terms of cost. Like, we're paying it now, you know, it's over the couple-year period, you know, it's not really going to break the bank.
Okay, so in the interest of time, I want to keep moving because
Laurel has a question or comment.
Has a question?
Laurel, online?
Yeah, I
was just going to say, Laurel, next.
I've mentioned this a number of times, but I think we're the only organization that's actually gotten grants that contribute to this whole process. And our Bureau of Reclamation grant has 3 wells, new wells with, you know, to put in permanent continuous monitoring with telemetry. And I don't know if that was considered when you put your budget together. I contacted Eric a number of times to find out what his recommendations were for locations, but I never really got any response. So it may be that you could reduce your budget a bit because we do have this grant money.
Laurel, thank you for that. And Laurel's been a great supporter of our GSA. And it sounds like we need a little bit of homework, maybe, perhaps. So we have we do have an issue on the table of paying the amending the budget right at this moment, which I would entertain a motion if. Okay.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and recommended for the proposed action. Go for a roll call vote.
Director Crane.
Aye.
Director Gasca.
Aye.
Director McNerlin.
Aye.
Director White.
Aye.
And Chair McCordy.
Aye. Thank you very much. Okay, so next we actually have the 24-25 budget proposal. Item E.
give me 1 second, please. Okay, so at least from my perspective, there's been significant work by the Fee Study Ad Hoc Committee to responsibly look at a revenue side of the budget as well as the expense side. I think that Sean accurately reflected the desires of the board and the TAC, the ad hoc committee, to push out certain PMAs and really streamline the budget, which I think at one point was on the expense side in excess of $1 million. So we're presenting a budget that has, at a high level, roughly $500,000 in expenses. I know there's some questions about that. On the revenue side, we tested different revenue levels against what the resulting cash flow would look like on a monthly basis and then on an annual basis. And I think one of the forcing functions that the committee wanted to see was, could we achieve $200,000 in reserves after a 5-year budget cycle based on different assumed revenue assumptions. And we looked at $600,000 of revenue, $700,000 in revenue, and $800,000 in revenue. And with some workarounds, I think we can make a $600,000 revenue assumption work with roughly $500,000 in expenses. That would require, in a few months, for agencies to prepay what they would ordinarily be charged so that we can meet cash flow on a monthly basis. And having had some discussions with those entities, seems to be a willingness to do that. You know, as the new guy, my perspective is this is a very stripped down budget. And I think there could be risk associated with that, but we can manage to that risk. And I think we can manage costs within that. My hope today is that the board would consider a fee basis of $600,000 that would allow us to move forward with either an ordinance or a resolution. Does not commit you to adopting and assessing at that level, even though I do think it's a minimum level. But it keeps us kind of on schedule to make target dates going forward. So I'm happy to go into any level of detail, but I'll pause there and see if there's any questions from the board.
Sean.
Yeah, just to clarify, what Harry was referring to was to get this budget under control. And at one point we were looking at like $1.2, $1.3 million. So $600,000 I think is significant progress. But to make that happen, as we're trying to build our reserve to a smaller level and over a longer period of time, there were parts of the fiscal year cycle where even though things were slowly building, there would be brief, momentary periods where it would at least be on paper overdrawn. So there was a question posed, like if, for instance, the city got invoiced a few months earlier than normal to bridge that gap in an effort to maintain like a $600,000 funding level, would we be willing to do that? And I said, I think we would. I think for us and for everyone, it'd be much better to pay a few months early to have a budget that we see as sustainable over the long term than agree to something much larger to sort of meet this arbitrary dip in the funding cycle for a month, essentially. So that's sort of what that is referring to.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out too, I looked at it after we had met, and
oh yes,
the only reason we really even hit that kind of negative balance for that cash flow crunch is because we're changing our billing cycle and revenue collection.
Right.
You know, correctly, we're collecting revenue September, October, November. That's when the member agencies have been paying. And now we're switching to December, which if we were collecting the money as we have been, we wouldn't even have that in the first place.
Exactly. So, thank you for doing that. Your edits to the spreadsheet were actually very helpful.
So it's a timing issue to just layer on to Sean's clarifications.
Al?
It's been my understanding all along that we committed as agencies to a certain amount of money over a certain period of time. And nothing we're talking about here changes the amount, only the timing of that amount. Is that a correct understanding?
Yeah, it's a timing issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, $600,000 on a year snapshot clearly meets $500,000 in expenses. It's just as you go month by month, because we are collecting in arrears, we got to pay the bills early in the year. We need a solution to that. And so pre-collection of that would solve the problem.
So from our agency standpoint, as a contributor, we are comfortable maintaining our full contribution. And we've been pretty clear that when that time is up, that contribution is up too. And that is the motivator, the driving force behind this accelerated rate and fee study process that we funded to ensure that when that money supply ends, there's continuing funding. So that's a correct understanding, and I don't have any questions.
It's my understanding.
Moving forward on a budget, I mean, I'd like to see more detail in the line items. I'd like to see more transparency on who we're giving money to, what contracts there are, agencies. You know, when I look at the budget and I see legal $43,000 out of a $600,000 budget, that's concerning. You know, or when I look at $164,000 is on EMAs and all of the rest is admin, that's concerning. You know, so I see costs and I see numbers, but it doesn't really tell me anything. You know, it's very little information. And I think that's one complaint that the public has, is transparency in what's being spent here, as I read through other agenda items and when it comes to the rate and fee. So I'd like to see a budget sheet that's maybe revamped, that's a little more detailed, shows where we're spending money. So explain to me $29,000 for legal expenses for GSA admin. You know, that's pretty vague, right? That's a large amount of money. Rate and fee legal changes. Grant writing, I see we have $24,000. Do we have any specific grants we're looking at to spend that money on? We just spent 30. We just approved another 12, right? So I moving forward, and we did talk about this one-on-one, but I want to make it public as well, that I'm looking for something more detailed and it explains it. And like when I look at the city's budget, you know, there's a paragraph behind a line item that I can open the page and read what's being spent on that line item. Everything is explained. I feel like I don't have explanations when I sit on this board and look at these budgets.
Sean? Yeah, I just, in Harry's defense as the new guy here, he was under significant pressure by some TAC members to collapse the budget and make it more simple. And I think as moving forward, you know, he has an opportunity to receive direction. There may be an opportunity here for an abridged and a detailed for those who want the simple and those that want to get down into the weeds. But I think for today, it was recommendation of others that it be more collapsed. I'm sure they can provide you the detail that
you know, and when passing a budget, I want to see what was the 22-23 budget, the 23-24 budget, and the 24-25 budget. I want to see the trend. You know, when I pass a budget, I want to see that, and I think I have the last 18 years on every board I've sit on. And it's not here, it's not a reflection on Harry. This is your first time here. You're brand new, right? But
Director Crane.
Looking forward to seeing our burn rate past and currently as we go along, which is I think what you spoke to in part. It provides how is the money being used in as we proceed, I think will help us understand. And learning what we have burned in the current year of what was set out for our budget is clearly helpful for us to understand. Does that help you?
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
I have to agree with Teresa. I'd like a little more detail. When I look at board TAC annual workshops, $43,000, that's a lot of money. I mean, really, when we conduct a board of supervisors meeting, which we have, you know, legions of people in here, we're budgeting about 10,000 a meeting, and this is close, you know. And I'd like to know more detail on that. So I'm not sure how this was all put together. It is something that's always been a little bit baffling. I guess we haven't worried about it because we had grant funding to help us get started, and then the membership. So now it's coming down to where we're spending our constituents' money. So the level of detail we need has got to be there. So.
Well, I take your feedback to heart, and all I can do is commit to meet your expectations. I mean, it's really that simple. You know, this is a outsourced staff, and in defense of people that work on it, I know that they are very cost conscious, and we are very sensitized to these issues that you're dealing with. And the reality of Sigma is you can either insource to address compliance, or you can outsource, or you can do a hybrid, a combination of both. I think we do that a little bit here. And, you know, we're just trying to be responsible in terms of how we move forward. And, you know, I'm reading you on all channels and frequencies. So.
Good. So I'd just also like to thank the budget ad hoc for coming down out of the stratosphere into something that looks affordable, and for a little better understanding of how we need to spend in order to be compliant with DWR, which took us a while to figure out. We weren't getting good information, I don't think. Now I feel we're in a much better place where we're looking at this and saying there is potential to do this. So.
So I agree with you on the meeting. That was one of the things I saw too. I was like, what, you know, what is that line item made up of for $44,000 for board and TAC meetings? And, you know, I feel comfortable moving forward with the $600,000 budget as far as giving that to Catherine to work with. But before passing an actual budget, I would like to see more detail of where this money's going.
Okay. Would you like to make a proposal to return it to staff for more detail before we consider the budget?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you want to make that motion?
Motion.
Okay, is there someone to second it? Okay. Discussion.
So just to clarify, we're just talking about the expense portion of the budget at this point. It's still on the table is at least the income side that we can move forward with that does not commit you to that level, but at least allows us to stay on timeline with the potential ordinance resolution process. Okay.
Second agrees.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right, then if not, we'll call for a vote.
Devin Bohr has their hand raised. I don't know if you wanted to take that comment before we made a vote.
I'm sorry, I can't see that part of the screen. Devin, go ahead.
Yes, hi, Devin Bohr, Mendocino County Farm Bureau. Just a clarifier in terms of, and this may come up in the next item, so we can talk about it there if that's more relevant. But you know, $600,000 looking at this budget going forward for the next fiscal year. You know, when we looked at what was being proposed on the fee analysis, there was 3 levels of budget from 600,000, 700,000, and 800,000. So how did this process with the budget ad hoc, was there any interaction with the team working on the fee proposal? Thank you.
Adam, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, there was. I mean, it initially, before we had a lot of ad hoc committee meetings, it was 600, 700, 800. And then at the end, we came back down to 600, because at least with the rate and fee study, we have to set the ceiling. Not that we have to set the ceiling of what we could charge, but it doesn't commit us to charging that. And so, I mean, it's the same with the budget. We can approve the budget, but it doesn't mean that we have to spend the money. It's just the worst case scenario, basically. So it's a different level of a worst case scenario.
Have you ever known a government not to spend the amount
Well, no,
they're
but I mean, the
authorized?
other thing is we can under budget and then we come back with budget amendments to spend more than we anticipated. I mean, it really depends. That's where the responsibility of the board is then, and making sure that, this is the worst case scenario that you stay under. Because with the rate and fee study legally, we can't go above. Like there is no budget adjustment to that unless we do another rate and fee study, but then the cost is so high, obviously we don't want to do that. If that clarifies.
Okay.
Did I answer your question, Devin?
You're on mute, Devin.
Sorry. Yes, it did. I just wanted to make sure that there was, some correlation there, what's going to be considered under the next item discussing the fee schedule. So thank you.
Yeah. So Catherine had to make some assumptions about revenue levels, and I think the direction she was giving is we're testing out 3 different levels of revenue from a cash flow basis, and then also from a reserve basis, and also can we meet expenses? And so those were the theoretical levels we were looking at. We think we can fit everything into, as at least presented today, into 600. Again, that does not commit you to assessing at that level, but it's a threshold level that I think passes the test.
Okay. With that, we're going to move on to item F, which is the draft fee study report and fee study.
We have, through the chair, we have to take the vote still.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So we have a motion to postpone the formal approval of the fiscal year 24-25 budget until the next meeting, but are able to proceed with a projected revenue need of $600,000 from Director McNerlin and a second from Director Gasca. So I can take a vote off of that?
Yes, please.
Okay. Director Crane?
Aye.
Director Gasca?
Aye.
Director McNerlin?
Aye.
Director White?
Aye.
And Chair McCourty?
Aye. Okay, the motion carries. Now we can go on to F, which is draft fee study report and fee study completion options. Harry? Sorry, I can't hear you.
10-minute break.
Yeah, we had a break scheduled. Given that we're running behind schedule, if we need a bio break, I would recommend we take one, but maybe make it a 5-minute break as opposed to a 10-minute.
Okay. I'm working on a hard.
And that's all you need sometimes when you're feeling like you got nobody.
It was helpful to have somebody there kind of holding my hand and guiding me and letting me know this is kind of the normal. It felt like I was becoming a new mom, so it was very interesting and helpful, very, very helpful.
You know, there was that self-conscious part of me, like, will I be accepted even though I'm not perfect?
What I like the most is that she really listens.
The support that she gives me is special because she does it with love, and it's just natural, that's all I could say. It just feels like somebody that I've known since I was little.
I said to Jeanette, Jeanette, you're supposed to be with me for 5 years. Jeanette said, yeah, I know, I'm going to be with you guys for 5 years. That's when I said, well, I guess I can trust her. She's going to be with us for 5 years.
Yo creo que quizás pasó como a la segunda visita o algo así, como que ya nos presentamos formalmente. Y luego ya creo que en la segunda visita estaba como todo más tranquilo, como muy, como que el ambiente era muy familiar, entonces yo me sentí muy cómoda.
Felt like she cared for Sparrow too, and Sparrow really enjoyed it. Yeah, she knew when Gabby came we were going to be making something or learning something, and she'd instantly start digging through Gabby's bags to find out what activity we were going to do.
Not only did we get the assistance with this program, but we also made a really good friend. I'm happy to call Gabby our friend.
I think the relationship that we've built has been just, she's a part of the family.
Are you prepared? We're the Office of Emergency Services, and we're committed to providing the most up-to-date and accurate information so that you and your family can stay safe during an emergency. Visit MendoReady.org. It's our one-stop shop for emergency information. You can sign up for emergency alerts, find your pre-established evacuation zone on our current emergencies map, and find hazard and preparedness information.
Imagine you're faced with a disaster such as a wildfire, and you're ordered to evacuate. I'll bet you wish you had more time in that moment. Now's your chance to buy yourself that time. Sign up for Nixle and Mendo Alerts on our website, MendoReady.org. Do it today.
If you want your family to be as resilient as possible, it's important to take some time today and visit MendoReady.org, where you can look up your pre-established evacuation zones on our current emergencies map. You can also find important tools to help maintain your situational awareness, such as the Alert California wildfire cameras and the Caltrans road conditions cameras. We hope you'll take some time today to prepare so that your family can be Mendo ready. Thank you.
When I first realized that I was going to be a parent, I was super scared. After 2 or 3 weeks of meeting in the home visiting program, I was totally comfortable with the fact that I was going to have a baby. Yes, I was still scared, but at the same time, I felt like I had some sense of strength behind me.
If I didn't have those resources that Jeanette provided me, I think it would be harder now.
I got into the program and I realized, like, oh, this is nice. And now look at me, I work at a family resource center with parents and families, all this stuff.
I'm so grateful that I got the opportunity to meet my home visitor, because without her, I think that I would be 10 steps behind from where I'm at right now.
Pero pues aquí pues ya los enseñan un poquito más cosas que uno no sabía, como cómo cuidarla, cómo desarrollarla, cómo educarla, y pues es algo bien porque pues cosas que yo no sabía, pues ya usted nos las dijo y todo como consejos, y pues muchas cosas que se aprendieron.
I don't know what's normal for a 22-month-old baby or an 18-month-old baby, you know. When we get together.
If we're not finished with our deliberations and discussion, I will leave you and have our vice chair take over at that point. So we're on a time crunch here, and I hate to rush anybody, and it's probably my fault for not being the best board chair, seeing as how we're about almost 40 minutes behind schedule.
Get on with it.
Okay, item F, which is the draft fee study report and fee study completion options. Staff. I guess we're on to Harry, do you want to lead this off?
Sorry. So Catherine's on the line here. She zoomed in to do the presentation.
Okay.
Indigo, would you mind queuing that up? Fee study?
Yes.
Catherine, are you ready to, are you willing to share screen? It might be easier for you to present from your side.
Yeah, I'll share.
Welcome, Catherine. Good to see you.
Hi, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Hi, if you could just give me a nod or something that you can see the presentation.
We can see it.
Thank you. All right, so in your board packet for this meeting, you have a draft report. And I'm not going to spend the time going through the entire report because most of what is in the report is material that we have gone over in prior meetings. So there's really just a few things I want to focus in on with this presentation, and then of course answer questions, comments, concerns. So the topics today, we are going to continue with that topic of the report cost basis. I'm going to talk to you about some Group 2 fee changes that have been made since the last time I presented the fee structure to you. I'm going to provide a recap of the fee structure and how collection of the fee would be undertaken. And then to provide a comparison of fees at 3 different fee levels at the 800,000, the 700,000, and the 600,000 budget levels. And I didn't have a bullet on here, but wrap up with a timeline as well. So starting out with the cost basis, as you've already heard today, I was provided the direction to run the analysis, the fee at 3 different three different budget levels, generating fee revenues of the 800,000, 700, and 600,000. So to keep things a little bit more simple in the report layout, what I did was I kept the body of the report at the 800,000 fee level, but I included appendices D and E at the 2 other budget levels, fee levels, with the idea being that hopefully there would be direction to me at the end of this presentation today to say, please move forward with one of the budget levels in the report. So at a high level overview at these 3 different budget levels, the amount of money that would be generated, or at least estimated to be generated over the next 5 years, at that $800,000 level, it's $2 million over 5 years. At the $700,000, it's about $1.5 million. And at the $600,000 level, it's about $1 million. So that really gives you an idea of the range of revenue that would be generated for PMA work. The second thing I wanted to address was Group 2. And so the feedback that I received from the last board meeting was there was some discomfort with the Group 2 fee. And also when we presented to the public in March, I heard that too from members of the public. So I took a deeper dive into Group 2 to see if there were things that could be done. I knew things could be done going forward, and this is not the only area. There are areas within this fee structure that can be refined over time. This is not, you're not locking yourself into a fee structure for years. So I want to make sure everybody really understands there is some flexibility within this fee structure, but I really did want to try and address the Group 2 fee concerns. So one of the concerns was about charging a fee to parcels with cannabis licenses. In March, the fee structure I presented to you, those parcels with cannabis licenses would be counted or classified, I should say, as Group 2 cropland along with other crop growing types of parcels. And there was some concern there that they're really not the same kind of growers. There was some concern that they really don't use that much water. But there was also a very strong sentiment that they should be paying something. So I was trying to work on how to incorporate that. Secondly, there was concern about Ukiah being very different in its geography. So in other areas, it's more typical if you have a farmed piece of land that the cropping, the growing activity is occurring on, 90% or more of the parcel. In Ukiah, it's a very different landscape. There are a lot of, and I think maybe this is on the next screen. Oh, I'm moving a little ahead of myself, but that's okay. There's a lot of hobby growers, and then there's also the commercial growers. And so some people might be only conducting that agricultural activity on a very small piece of their parcel, whereas others, commercial growers, are using very large parts of their parcel, and is it really equitable that everybody's paying the same for the whole parcel? So, sorry, I went a little bit back and forward here. Let me just address the cannabis license. So the idea I came up with for cannabis licenses was to cap those properties paying the fee on just 1 acre. So the reason for that is that there are parcels that might have one cannabis license, but there's more parcels that have at least 2 cannabis licenses on one parcel. There's even some with 3 licenses on one parcel. But as you can see with this table, the county has regulation for maximum canopy that can be grown in square feet per license. So if somebody has, and this is quite common, a medium cultivation and a large cultivation license on their property, at most their canopy area is going to be less than half an acre. There are others, this is also quite common, that have a large cultivation and a nursery stock license on one property. And you can see that would be, about 0.8 or so canopy area in acres. So it is highly unlikely that you would have a legal cannabis property that is growing on more than 1 acre. Therefore, my suggestion is that those parcels get capped at 1 acre. The other thing to know is that there are currently 50 parcels that have these licenses, and of those, 28 of them are growing other crops already. So they would already be classified as crop 2 cropland. So the parcels that get included in in group 2 cropland as a result of having a cannabis license or licensors, there's 22 of them currently. Now that can change year to year. It might change when the updated data is pulled from the county to actually set the fee. But that's the reasoning behind that 1 acre cap. For the different amounts of property that are actually being cropped, growing, what I did was I created 4 different fee bands. And the fee bands are based on the area of the property that is growing. To do this, we use the DWR cropping map data. This is the 2020 data. Currently, that's what we built our database with. Each year that can be updated to the most recent data. There is now a 2022 data set out, for example. What we did was we set a threshold of 4% or under 4% for that first band to just allow for variances, to allow for the fact that the aerial imagery and the mapping data sets don't always line up perfectly. And so on advice, I asked the GIS analyst, what do you think is kind of that margin of error there that we should allow for, and that their recommendation was 4%. So that's why that's 4%. And then just looking at the, I did an analysis kind of in bins of what, how much has been grown on the parcels. And that's how I arrived at these different fee bands. So 4% to under 30%, 30% to 67%, and then really parcels that are growing more than, using their land, that parcel, more than 2/3 of it is growing a crop. And use the data then collected from those parcels to create a weighting. So now instead of just having one fee for the group 2, there are now 4 fees within group 2, and the cannabis parcels are restricted to just being charged on 1 acre of the property. I want to recap the structure of the fee with you. As explained in the report, there is a Part 1 fee. This is the base fee. Every single parcel, unless it is fee exempt, would pay the base fee. And then there's a Part 2 fee, which is the group fee. So depending on which group a parcel is categorized in, they would pay differently. So fee group 1, this is the Part 2 fee. That's the public water systems. Fee group 2 is cropland, and there are definitions for each of these. Fee group 3 is the homes and the businesses that are not in fee groups 1 or 2, but there's an improved structure on the property. So the assumption is that they are using groundwater. And then fee group 3 is all the other property with any portion of that parcel being within the GSA boundary that that we do not believe to be using groundwater. And to explain how the fee would be collected, the base fee is a fee per acre that is applied to the area of a parcel within the GSA boundaries, and that would be placed on the property tax bill. For fee group 2, that is a bill that is sent directly to each of the public water systems, and it's being calculated on a per 1,000 gallons extracted basis. The reason why on 1,000 gallons is that is how the water purveyors most of them are reporting the information to the state. There is some conversion occurring for a couple of the water systems, but the majority are reporting in thousands of gallons. And also for the general public understand thousands of gallons. They're used to seeing it on their bills generally. For fee group 2, as I explained, this is we're capping the cannabis cropland parcels at 1 acre, and then there's 4 fee bands that depend on the percentage of the parcel being cropped, which is being calculated by GIS analysis. Those fees are placed on the property tax bill. Fee group 3, this is a fee per acre. That is, I should have said 2, group 2 is also a fee per acre. For fee group 3, it's applied to the entire parcel acreage as well, just like fee group 2. For this, the residential parcels are capped at half an acre. The reason being that the water using portion of a parcel is most likely restricted to the home or the business, the home, and perhaps, a small vegetable garden, something like that. And then fee group 4, they would just pay the base fee. And if there are properties, we know that there are properties that do not pay property taxes, they will be billed by the GSA annually between September and December, just like the bills that go to the public water systems. This table provides the calculated regulatory fee for fiscal year 2025 at the $800,000 budget level. Everybody would be paying a base fee of $4.18 per acre that is within the GSA boundary. And then you can see, I'm not going to read each one of these out, but you can see here on the cropland, fee group 2, if a small portion of the parcel is growing, you can see that fee is lower, and that increases for how much is being grown on the property. The fee is still per acre of the entire parcel, but the fee differentiates between these fee bands. I wanted to show you visually, it's just a very high level visual of these different fee groups. So who's paying what? It's quite helpful, I think, to see. First of all, I would point out fee group 4. Those are the folks that aren't paying. This is really primarily rangeland. So there's a lot of rangeland out here. These parcels in yellow that would just be paying the base fee. Fee group 1 is in red. These are parcels that are paying the base fee, but then they're paying their group 2 fee through their water provider. So the water provider gets the bill. It's up to them to determine the most equitable way then to share that cost amongst their customers. Fee group 2 is in blue. The band 1, which is the lower than 4%, is in the very area cropped is in the very light blue. There's a few of them. You can't see all of them because this is very high level bird's eye view. And then the darker ones, these are the more commercial growing parcels. But just to kind of give you a visual of how this fee gets applied. Question came up. Well, what does the revenue pie chart look like for each of the groups? In this pie chart here, I'm consolidating the part 1 and the part 2 fees to show how each of the groups are paying. In group 1, this is the public water systems. There are some property owners that will just be paying the base fee because they're within the public water system area, but they're not actually served by the public water system. Public water systems have about a quarter of the total cost. Group 2, about 63%. Group 3, just about 3%, and group 4, about 3%. So this is just base fees here. These two slices, this sort of pinkish salmon color and this brownish slice of the pie, these two, they're just paying the part 1, the base fees. And I have a couple of slides that are comparison slides of how much would be paid annually by a single family home if they're in groups 1 or 3. So it's presented as a range because if you're in group 1, it's likely that the fee will change depending on how much water you use. It does depend how the public water system passes along cost to the customer. If you're in group 3, it depends on how much acreage you have, although of course it does get capped at half an acre. But just to give a range, annually a single family home at the $800,000 budget level would be paying somewhere between $13 and $34 a year. At the $700,000 level, between $11 and $30 per year, and at the $600,000 level, between $9 and $26 a year. This slide has a cropland fees comparison. In this example, it's assumed that there is a 10-acre parcel, and that 10-acre parcel in each of the fee bands would pay a different amount. So if very, very little of that parcel is actually being cropped, their fee would be substantially lower than if more than 2/3 of the property is being cropped. And then I've shown what these fees would be at the $800,000, $700,000, and $600,000 level. These fees do include both the base fee and the group fee total for this 10-acre parcel. So you can see a range for each of these fee bands. Okay, so I want to take a moment to talk about the annual fee update process and what that might look like. In the fee study, it is recommended that annual adjustments are made to the fee based on the 5-year rolling average extraction estimates for groups 1 and 2. I should have added there too also with the updated cannabis license information, because that will change each year, and the GSA's adopted budget for the next fiscal year. But I also do want to point out, you do have an option here. You could set the fee on historical extraction data, and you could review it every few years. That is one way to reduce costs, but it could also be viewed as not being as equitable. I do include in the fee study that in the event say for example, you do adopt a resolution that directs that the fee would be adjusted every year for the 5-year rolling average, but then for some reason it didn't happen, that the fee study would recommend including an automatic fee increase in the fee resolution. And that fee increase could either be a very simple one where you state it's a certain percentage each year. I did put 4% in there as the recommendation based on the historical indice data that's provided in the report, or you could tie an increase to the change, and I would recommend the West Region Consumer Price Index for the previous 12 months, and that's prepared by Bureau of Labor Statistics. So either way, you know, I'm definitely looking for some direction on this as well. Okay, so for the fiscal year 2025 implementation steps, one of the things that would be helpful to have from this meeting is whether all of those 3 budget levels stay in the fee report, or if you want me to remove 1 or 2 of them for the final report moving forward. And then I would prepare that final report, incorporating your direction and feedback, plus any data updates, because now there is a 2023 GSA annual report, and that information can be included. There will also be the 2023 groundwater extraction data that was not available as I was preparing this database for the draft report. Then the board would accept the final report and determine a meeting date for the adoption. There's certain requirements in SGMA that you have to meet, that you post all of the fee materials, and that you advertise the public meeting or hearing, and you just have to follow some very certain SGMA requirements, and I'm sure the legal team will help you through that. So timeline to implementation, this is subject to change based on direction that you give from legal team and staff input. But at this point, I'm presenting the draft report, then the idea would be at the next meeting that the board accepts the final report. There needs to be at some point a resolution regulating de minimis uses. It doesn't necessarily have to be at this date. Again, I would look to legal counsel for that advice. And then in June, prepare the notices of the meeting that's going to be held for the fee adoption. And also the California Public Utilities Commission has to be notified about the fee. It's really just a formality. It's in SGMA, you have to do it. And so I'm happy to help with that letter. I've done it before a couple of times. That's because you have Regina Water Company within your GSA area, and so fee would be imposed upon customers of Regina. And then there would be a public meeting to discuss that fee with the potential adoption in June or July. And come August, we would have to meet the county's requirements then for submitting the tax rolls to get on the property taxes, and also to prepare what we call them handbills. That's those direct bills to the public water systems and to those customers that do not receive property tax bills. Following fee adoption, you would have the fee consultant calculate the fee amount for every parcel in the GSA with that most current assessor information, preparing the roll for the auditor controller. That's usually they require by about August 10th. Each county is different. I'm not sure yet what Mendocino County is requiring for 2023. As I mentioned, preparing those handbills. And then just a note that regardless of exactly what direction you give to staff for updating the fee each year, every year a fee resolution has to be adopted by the board in order to put it onto the tax roll. So the county will, that's a requirement of the county. You'll have to do that regardless of what you do with the fee amounts. Okay. So, questions?
And board members, Al.
The sub, whatever you call it, used for the
Bands.
bands. I think this creates a little bit of equitability. I administer that. How much is run the? I guess I think and everybody slice. Everyone would like their slice. In this pie bigger. Slices are now bigger. Getting the slices more.
And I'm of the public and board members, and so that's really, you know, why the fee bands were created. In terms of, does it really add more for administration costs? No. The way that this fee has been built, this fee structure is being built, has been really taking to heart that commentary we've received about trying to minimize the work that's needed each year. So not having to ask everyone to provide their information each year, but being able to go to the state and just pull the information. And then B, pulling, so much of this is actually generated through GIS mapping. So to have the GIS team to create that fee map each year, and then they provide the Excel database, the fee consultant, whoever it is, then applies the rules to the database. And based on those rules, every parcel gets put into a category and the fee gets calculated. So, you know, it was really the goal was to try and make this minimally administratively burdensome each year and cost. So hope I answered your question.
Other questions?
I don't have questions, but I have comments from which are below Millview, with the exception of their business, but they that it is a burden to receive from is a fee water monitoring, right? And fee monitoring do not have the burden on how to pay on all of their customers. So it's just shouldn't everyone pay the same consumption is. Supposed to be doing is money. So, but now we're this whole and bear with me, I'm sorry, but the whole study is based on consumption, right? So that's a hard pill for them to swallow. People I represent. And let me just look at my notes from my last meeting. So they didn't want to see any groups. They think that this fee should be based on monitoring and sustainability, not based on usage. They think it should all go through the county. It's just tax on every parcel.
And then they asked, is the base fee based on parcel or water hookup? And then another comment that was made says regarding two connections. I don't know if this is still true. The municipalities should not be making the call on how to bill a property owner for this. This is the GSA's decision, and why is there a GSA board and staff? Why should a private unmetered well on a parcel be given a discounted rate on a parcel charge when that property owner has not contributed a single dollar to any of the GSA fees to date? The county is willing to bill private well property owners, but not the other property owners that have district connections, ? Any comments you have, take back with me.
I'll just address one piece of what you asked, and that was about the base fee. That's not based on the connections. That is a acreage fee for all parcels for the property that's within the GSA's boundary.
Any other board member questions? A comment again, I'll go back to my own broken record of, I don't have groundwater, and about half of my property, my parcels, is riparian zone that I could never plant on. So being assessed for something that I don't have access to doesn't seem fair. I can see how this would work really well in a place like Salinas, where there is no surface water to speak of, and it's all coming out of the ground. But basically I can't support this the way it is. Let's go to online call. So Devin Boer.
Good afternoon, Devin Boer, Mendocino County Farm Bureau. Just a couple of questions, perhaps for staff, in terms of, the feed ban development was, a new concept in this draft. And so, Director White, mentioned that, there is some appreciation there for looking at the variability that we deal with in croppage. I guess on the admin side, the question I had was, as we see fluctuations, and it may not be every year, but we do see rotations of crops. We do see, replants and things happening where acreages change. Is that going to fall to working through the assessor's office with the county if we see a percentage change in cropped land? Is that going to be the GSA's responsibility to maintain in a GSA database? I know we tend to have issues sometimes in keeping current data, through the assessor's office. So that's just one question to bring forward. And I do understand the concern that Director McGorty just brought forward. I've been hearing it as well from our members who don't necessarily use groundwater. I guess my concern on the flip side, just as a point of conversation, is that if we see surface water issues coming forward, like the Potter Valley project, the assumption is that folks with groundwater may have to pay for surface water use. So I think all in all, this is a bigger picture conversation that, ties together with various pieces of the puzzle, and hopefully we can make this move forward. The following question / statement would be just, how we work, with the GSA, what the timeline is to bring back the budget for final approval for fiscal year 25, I think will be key to understanding how this fee structure is going to move forward. So just a question on the timing for that as well. Thank you.
Okay, so let's go to Frost Polly next.
Thank you. And I thank you, Catherine, first off, for your presentation. That was wonderful. I'm still trying to understand the fee band structure. And I wanted to ask Catherine, on a few slides back, there was a breakdown of the acreage by fee band. There we go. That I'm just to clarify, that's those numbers, the acreages there, that breakdown, that's a planted acreage, or is that total acreage of all the parcels in that fee band?
Total acreage of all the parcels within that fee band.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Scott Morris.
Hi, everybody. I wanted to try to respond to the director's question about, or she was really bringing in comments from others, but first, my belief is Catherine has done an amazing job of trying to walk this almost impossible precipice that the courts have laid out for her as far as making a fee legal under California law. And so that's one of the large reasons that there is this quote unquote consumptive basis for the fees, because the courts have held that these kinds of fees have to be based on burdens and benefits given or to certain parcels. And there are cases that are very specific that say one of the ways to do that is to charge by the amount of groundwater that's actually used. So maybe that will help your constituents. It's still very confusing, but that's why there's that component in there that's attempting to simulate what people are actually, the amount of groundwater is actually used. As far as the having the public agents, the public water systems figure out how to do it, part of that reason is that I don't, the GSA has the ability to charge fees, but it doesn't have the ability to tell a public, and therefore it would just give a bill to the public agency, but it doesn't have the authority to tell it how to pay it. For example, if a public agency had the means and it wanted to, it could simply use other revenues it has, assuming it's from a proper purpose, like property taxes or something, to pay all of the fees and not charge an additional fee to their constituents on that. That may be unlikely because those fees are, very thinly stretched as it is. But the point being that the GSA doesn't really have the authority to dictate, who you charge and how you charge when it gives a bill to a public agency. It just says, please give us this much money. And it's up to them to figure out how to do it. So I'm hoping that gives you a little bit more insight, and if it doesn't, be happy to answer some more questions.
Yeah, but their concern is they don't want to be billed at all. They want GSA to bill the parcel through the county. However, the other group want their customer responsibility and administrative cost of doing that.
Okay.
Scott, I have a question for you too. In my case, where I have no access to the resource, is it still required that I pay?
So this issue has been ongoing from quite a while, the district, and my understanding is that most of the constituents have I'm trying to interpret what I'm hearing, so I could get it wrong, but my understanding is that the study groups and TAC groups and everything have figured out that it's virtually impossible at this stage to try to determine, where some of the water is coming from. It's a mixture of surface and groundwater. And so therefore, this is an attempt to try to capture people that are actually using groundwater to the extent they can. Because, in some cases, the groundwater is going to be recharging the rivers, and when people are drawing it out of the river, at least partially are getting it from the groundwater. So that's the logic. I can see that, there are questions and concerns about it. And I think that's why the data gap issue is so important, especially the one that is trying to determine the impact of the groundwater on the streams and vice versa. And at that point, I would expect the agency, as it learns more, to go back and adjust the fees or do a new fee study. Did I get that right, Catherine?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And what about areas that you're absolutely prohibited from touching, such as our riparian floodways? Should they be included in the calculation?
I don't know if I understand that. Do you understand that, Catherine?
No, are you saying like if there was a wetland parcel, for example?
No, this would be like, so my property consists of about 30 acres that I technically own, which includes the middle of the Russian River. That's how it's drawn. And about 16 acres would be riparian forest and river. So you can't farm that. So that's why I've advocated from the beginning that it should be on the basis of what's actually farmed. It really should be for people who are pumping water or otherwise irrigating, as opposed to an entire parcel where some of the land just simply isn't usable. It's more equitable if the ground that we're charging for is actually using water.
So Glenn, that's what the fee bands are addressing, is that if you do have a property that is classified as cropland, but let's say half of it is in the river, you could never actually crop it. So we're using the GIS information to say, okay, well, if 50% of it can't ever be cropped, you're only using a portion of it, you're going to be in a different fee band. So that's what that's trying to get to. It's the difficulty here. We have this trade-off of how much work do you put into the fee and the cost of doing that for the revenue that you're trying to attain from the fee, and trying to get to individual parcel detail really adds a tremendous amount of cost. But this is one way we can do it relatively easily and cost efficiently, is by using the GIS mapping and doing fee bands. And yes, you can have more fee bands. I looked into that too. But again, it's just creating more and more layers of data to sort through each year. So that's how I landed on the 4 fee bands.
Well, no, I appreciate that you've attempted to adjust this, but it goes of how, and the way to do it is assess who uses a resource, and this doesn't do that. So it makes it difficult for me to support it. Plus, I don't see a methodology for being able to, ask the GSA to adjust an appropriate fee. So on my property, I irrigate 7.5 acres out of 36. And I know there's other people in the same situation. So it's just something that I know is going to be a problem.
Another issue is like Redwood Valley doesn't have groundwater. They purchase their water from Millview, right? So
They do have some groundwater.
I just asked the district manager. He said no.
The water district doesn't. I mean, it's mostly domestic wells. I don't know how many.
May I?
You're muted.
The district doesn't have wells of its own, no. I mean, we are working on drilling wells at Millview property right now, but in terms of like, most of the wells in Redwood Valley are domestic. There may be some ag, but probably not many.
And then, so I asked him about Millview. Well, if Redwood Valley gets their water from Millview use groundwater. They have 2 wells, but most water comes from surface water diversion. So equity-wise, those water districts are paying a large portion of this. And I feel like they're kind of getting hosed a little bit.
I think they're paying based on their total.
So I could address that. The fee amounts to the public water systems are based off of groundwater extraction. That's the well extraction that's been reported to the state. So I'm not making anything up. Everything is taken directly from state files. And if it's water that was pumped from a well, it's included in the first step of the fee methodology. The first step of the fee methodology is estimating the amount of water, groundwater extraction from each of the fee groups. We're looking at, customers in groupings. And so I'm taking the data from the state. I'm taking the estimated groundwater use from the GSP and each subsequent annual report for the cropland, making an assumption for fee group 3. And based off of that groundwater extraction, that's how the cost gets allocated to each group each year. So it is attempting to address groundwater use by group.
So then Redwood Valley would have a 0 fee.
Right, but what I did was I put the systems together in the table in the report, so you're not seeing the breakout by Redwood and Millview and Willow.
All right, maybe that's where I'm a little confused.
Yeah, but if you look at the there is a table in the report that shows.
Yeah, I'm actually looking for that.
Yeah, let me find that too. Let's see. Give me a moment here, I'll find it. Okay.
Catherine, if you tell me the page number, I can pull it up for the entirety.
Well, you know, I do have page 22, but I have OWA collectively in that table. I'm trying to remember if I ever had them separated here. Not in the main body of the report. So I don't think I show that separately anywhere in the report. If you'd like the backup data, I can certainly provide it to you.
Yeah, I'm looking at 44. It just says IRWA. IRWA, Regina, Ukiah.
Yeah, page 22. Indigo, if you want to pull that up, if you can. It's table 13 on page 22. Great, thank you. So this has the groundwater production in thousands of gallons from each of the public water systems, but like I just said, you know, I've put collectively together there. And I know you also have recently consolidated and you have a new JPA organization, and so I don't know, you know, something for the GSA staff is, how would you want to receive the bill? Does it go to OWA? Does it go to individual ones? Does it go to the new JPA organization with Ukiah and Redwood and I think it's Millview? I might have that wrong. But those are things that can certainly be worked out. So it shows the average.
Just a comment on that. It would definitely have to be broken out separately because you can't bill IRWA as a whole when Redwood Valley is 0, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So GSA can take direction on how to do the billing.
Yeah, Glenn, I just want to address that issue that you raised about which anyone who isn't directly pumping groundwater has, which is why am I paying for that? And I mean, I look at, first of all, it's all one water. It rains, it runs, it soaks into the ground, finds its way into the groundwater, it gets pumped back out or bleeds out into the river, or it bleeds from the river into the ground. So it's a distinction that we're making that is a very blurry distinction. Is water intercepted? Is that from groundwater? Is that water that was in essence extracted from the total amount of groundwater? So like if you're a dry farmer, your fines are down there 15, 20 feet, or they're not going to make it. That soil profile fills up in the winter, and then you dry it out with your vines. And unless you get more than about 20 inches of rain, nothing of that rainfall ever made it to the groundwater. If you hadn't farmed that just sat there with bare dirt on it, that would be more or less field capacity down there, and you would be moving water in. So, I mean, we could like try to parse all those pieces so that everybody is only paying for exactly what, but then was it groundwater? You know, I just think that we're just headed into a whirlpool of nowhere. And other than getting people upset and raising costs, I don't know that the benefits.
You know, fair enough. I guess the thing that my recent experience of going through drought and not having any water and having neighbors with wells who were able to fully pump the water that they needed, there's quite a difference in their yield, Al, between their place and mine. And I had no options, and they did. Some of them have both surface and groundwater, and it just seems like the people who use the resource should be, you know, the leaders on paying for this, and I think Catherine's trying to do that. But then there's the issue of the places that you can't grow anything, to include that. And what I would have done in structuring this thing is, let's look at irrigated land, and that would be a more equitable way of actually paying for the cost of managing the water, because what I do in my place absolutely does not affect the water table in Ukiah Valley.
Well, irrigated land, if it's along the river, is oftentimes irrigated entirely from the river, no well. So how does that work?
So I don't think we have enough time to really get into a deep discussion of this, so we have to make a choice here, because we have to accept what our consultant is recommending. We can choose not to and continue it to get further clarification, or make sure that there's an option built in that if people do want to, you know, have consideration, that there's a way to have consideration if they don't agree with the fees that they're charged.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
may I
at this
address-
point, the option we have is that there's, you can make a case that you're in the wrong group or wrong band. And I feel that's adequate at this stage.
Okay. Doug?
May I address that, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
In addition to the fee study, you know, in it very, very not too distant future, you'll be asked to pass a resolution or an ordinance. And as part of that process, we often build in, for lack of a better term, I'll call it an appeals process. And that's sort of a due process safety bar, if you will, for people. I mean, you might get a bill and you don't even own the parcel or something like that, or you might get a bill that's clearly erroneous, or you might have a bill that you think is erroneous, but the agency thinks is fair. So there's usually a built-in appeal process, and you'll have to make some decisions on whether you want to do that or not. The difficult part is, it's what we generally recommend is, for those that are obvious, like, you know, wrong name or, you know, just an error, you delegate that authority to the general manager to settle it. But if it's more of a policy issue, or, you know, kind of things we've just been talking about the last few minutes, the general manager may want to defer that up to the board. But the idea being that if it's something obvious and ministerial, that the board doesn't have to deal with that all the time. I believe, Catherine, but I'm not sure, did you build in any kind of correction factor, or I think you did, in case, you know, some of these go away? I guess I would say some of the revenue goes away.
Yeah, I do. Not for the group one, because that data is coming from the states. I feel good about that data. But yes, I do have some adjustments. I do have some allowance for that in groups 2 and 3.
I just wanted to point, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to point out that there is, you know, a way to at least build in some due process and, lack of a better term, appeal process, if the board so chooses.
Okay, so that can be done through the resolution, is what you're telling me. Okay.
Definitely in favor of an appeal process, A. B, remember, we're already over. Right, Catherine? And C, question for Scott. So as far as the state requiring some sort of equity, or the legal system, I guess, state requiring equity, if a water district gets a bill and they're required, and they have to pass that bill on to their customers, are they required to follow those same equity rules? Will they have to look at how many gallons per customer and passing that fee on based on that? Or legally, could they just say, okay, we have 10,000 customers, $10,000 bill, everybody gets billed $1? Right.
Well, that's a really good question, and it depends on how they decide to pay for it, obviously, but.
Well, they
I've
only
seen
have, they don't have a property, they have one source of income, and that's Prop 218.
Yeah, so what I've seen some districts do, or some water agencies, I mean, do is they may tack on a quote regulatory fee or a GSA groundwater fee or something, but they do have to go through, if it's an increase in a fee, right, they will have to go through this fee study process eventually to do it legally. Or if they're a private water system, they don't have to do that. They may have to go to the PUC. But yes, like I think the short answer is yes, they have to follow whatever the law is that's applicable to them. And there's easy ways to do it by, tacking on a certain amount per amount used or something like that. So the study shouldn't be nearly as complex as this one.
No, I understand rate studies for them, but a lot of agencies, we only do rate studies every 5 years. So if this is a new fee for them next year, we're 1 year into our 5-year rate study, how do they legally bill their customers? Can they make it a general $2 fee, or does it have to be based equitably on how many gallons of groundwater that customer uses?
That is a difficult question for me to answer with what I know.
Well, those are the questions that who I represent ask me when I sit in on my meetings. And so I have to come here and get answers. Honestly, it's those meetings are brutal for me now because of this. So yeah, so they want to know how do we pass on that fee? How many thousands of dollars in man hours do we spend figuring out how much to bill each customer, and how do we legally do that? So, I'm asking you.
Well, I think if it were my client, I would recommend probably doing a fee study, but it would be very, very, very brief and wouldn't be nearly as complex as this. It would simply be, here's the GSA fee, and we've decided that we're going to base it on consumption, for example. Therefore, if we need to raise $10,000 and we have 10,000 gallons, then you're right, it'd be $1, per gallon. That's a really simplistic example, but it wouldn't be anything near as complicated as this one. You would have to still comply with all the notice requirements, and if it's a Prop 218 issue, then you got to do the ballot stuff. So it is not an easy task, but the fee study itself shouldn't be nearly as complicated.
That's why Irwood, they're like, hey, just have the county bill it on the property tax like they do everything else, right? Like my $1,200 to the school district and everything else I pay on my property tax. Not go through that. So
one can make the argument that this doesn't yield any water. It purely satisfies a regulatory burden for a given amount of land, which fits what you're speaking to. What that looks like in the way the state or the courts would deal with it, I have no clue, but it would certainly provide, if it was done on an acreage basis, then it could be as simple as the regulatory costs are spread over that many acres based upon who has how many acres, that's their bill. Whether that flies or not, I don't.
Well, the fee structure is really trying its best to mimic actual groundwater use. And as Scott said earlier, it's a very fine ledge, between what is stated in Sigma and legally what you can do and the data that's available and the opinions of stakeholders. And it has taken considerable effort to come up with a fee structure. I had told you at the very beginning of this whole process, I was expecting to come to you with 3 fee structures for your consideration. And that didn't happen. And it didn't happen because we're accounting for the data you have available, what people told us, and the legal aspect. And so it has been a challenging fee structure to create.
And we can see that, and this is, the dilemmas that we find are not because of lack of effort. It's just because it's a very complex situation. If we were just in one flat agricultural valley where all it was cropped, it's real easy. But because of just the whole craziness of how this valley is put together geologically and water supply, and all the different people were trying to find a way to contribute for this. That's what makes it difficult, in my opinion.
I want everyone to know my frustration is aimed towards the state of California, nobody else.
Yeah, I second that.
Unfunded mandates, love it. And the other side of it is, if it was purely based upon water use, the regulatory burden doesn't reflect that in any way. So there's no connection at all between how much water gets used or not used with the burden that the community has to bear. So this is more crap from Sacramento.
Yeah. Well, and kind of in the interest of time, since I have to leave pretty soon, I think we should probably go ahead and take a vote on this, and I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Can we clarify what the motion, for the record, what that motion exactly is?
To accept the draft proposal. Yeah.
I'll second it, the recommended action that the board approve the draft fee study report and direct staff to bring a fee resolution to the board as soon as feasible.
Okay, call for the vote.
Okay, we have Director Crane.
Aye.
Director Gasca.
Aye.
Director McNerlin.
Nay.
Director White.
Aye.
And Chair McCordy.
Abstain. I feel too conflicted to make a vote.
Oh,
That's fair enough.
Scott, can you clarify so that we have a majority of members present that are supportive of that? Is that a sufficient majority? But it's not a true majority of our total board.
Oh, no.
I actually don't know the answer to that, to be honest with you. I have to look up your.
all right, then we don't get billed for this hour. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching our cost control.
I thought it was the majority of those present.
I think we're good.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think so.
Just wanted to confirm.
Yeah, let's operate with that.
Scott, while
assumption.
you're here, could you
I have
tell?
like 4 of these things in my head at the same time.
Scott, would you mind talking about the difference between an ordinance and resolution briefly so we can try and get board direction on that pathway?
There are really 2 paths to do it, and in your case, there's not much difference at all because the county is requiring you to come back every year and do a resolution anyway. So in your case, if you're going to have a very detailed regulatory system, like you want a well registration process and you want to require certain things by certain dates and all that, I would recommend going through the ordinance process. But in this case, The only real regulation that you're going to be passing is that you're going to make a statement that you want to regulate, or that you are going to regulate de minimis users. And that allows you to actually charge a fee to these de minimis users. Otherwise, under Sigma, you can't. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's really not much difference in your case. If you want to, because you have to do a resolution every year, if you want to just go through and do a resolution every year, redoing the fees, or if you want to do a ordinance, you're still going to have to do the resolution every year. The only real difference between the two is the noticing requirements are a little bit more severe. So I'm thinking that you might as well just do it all by resolution in this situation.
I have to leave at this time, so I'm going to turn the meeting over to our vice chair. Thank you very much. Thanks for everyone. Thank you for putting up with me.
I have the same sort of problem. Is there anything that we must continue today? Stop here.
I just want to clarify direction on the resolution. So it sounds like that because of the annual necessity for that, we'll just go with the resolution approach as to ordinance so that we can stay on schedule. The plan will be to bring that resolution to the board at the June meeting. Okay.
Can I make a suggestion through the chair, vice chair? We had 3 contract amendments that were agendized, some for work that's hoping to happen in the next couple of months, including for enough funding for Catherine to consider this fee study, and then also for LWA to do the telemetry we previously discussed. We could move those all into a consent and make one vote for expediting the agenda if the board would be supportive of that.
Let's proceed on that basis.
Yeah, I would support that as well.
Okay, great. Do we need approval of the consent then?
But there was an error that we need to correct that everyone should know about.
Okay.
On the exemption for bid. Oh, I'm sorry. We haven't voted on. No, we are on that, right?
Yes.
We're on the consent. Okay. So on the exemption.
And with that clarification,
Yeah, we need to clarify that the numbers were wrong. It said that it was going from a $65,000 budget to a $100,000 budget. It's actually going from
65 to 112.
To 112,000.
Yep. With that clarification, you have a consent agenda in front of you.
Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Okay, moved and seconded. Roll call vote.
Okay, Director Crane.
Aye.
Director Gasca.
Aye.
Director McNorlin.
No.
Director White.
Aye.
And Chair McCordy.
Aye.
You might check and see if there's any public comment at least.
Is there any public comment on the consent agenda? I do not see any. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I think we can adjourn.
That when we have the rate study, we need a special meeting or something for that. Because Harry thought we were going to get out by noon. He just doesn't know our board well at all. That's why, and I told him there's no way.
And clearly I don't. I will let you know I am very optimistic about things, and
Yeah.
in this case I was overly optimistic.
And we actually just skipped 2 entire items, basically. So.
But in fairness to that, we did dissect those budget amendments in quite a bit of detail across multiple agenda items. So.
Yeah, but we weren't
could
able
use
to
more
discuss
time.
them as a board. So anyway, I think we need to manage our agenda so that we can spend adequate time on the rate study if we need to, or adequate time on the budget if we need to, and not have to do this at the end. Yeah.
Shut this down?
We'll talk.